OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
And you're very welcome along. It is the end of the first week of 2022 and the end of OTB AM for the week. I hope you've enjoyed the show over the course of the week. Maybe you're Novak Djokovic listening in from your one-star hotel in Melbourne. We're going to talk to Will O'Callaghan very shortly, who's my guest on the show today, about maybe Djokovic made a bit of a scapegoat in Melbourne. We did speak yesterday about the fact that maybe there's a lot of anger in Australia towards Djokovic and his anti-vax situation. We'll also hear from James Skehill later on in the show, talking about the Walsh Cup, and we'll have Alan Quinlan on as well, talking rugby. Very, very packed show today. And of course, Will O'Callaghan and Johnny Ward are excited because it's Walsh Cup action between our respective counties, Offaly and Galway, Will.
It is, Johnny. Yeah, Happy New Year to you. I was kind of worried there slightly in your intro when you said it's the end of OTB AM, and then you quickly followed up with this week. I thought we were bringing the curtain down the show there for a second.
I'm a struggling freelance journalist. I need any work I can get.
Yeah, look, Ballinasloe, it's one of those where, you know, it's that little bit closer as well, rather than Offaly having to go into Salt Hill this weekend. And it's a meeting of two former teammates. And in Michael Fenley's case, the Offaly manager playing against Henry Shefflin's team. And Henry Shefflin was the manager for Michael Fenley's last game as a player when he walked up to lift the All-Ireland Club Championship a couple of years ago. And Ballyhale continuing the defence of their title at the moment. So lots of kind of interesting narrative lines coming into that game that we can probably tease out with James Skehill. Obviously, Galway are without their players from St Thomas, including Conor Cooney, who shot the lights out in the local championship in Galway this year. But we'll see who is going to now emerge as the successor to Joe Canning as the talisman on the Galway team this year, and what kind of an impact maybe the Henry Shefflin might have on a team who many felt this time last year could be a contender to Limerick. And then they went and had a pretty dud year in the end.
Pretty much dud couple of years for Galway. Are you listening in, Joe Canning? Are you listening in from your Camille below in Limerick or wherever you're involved in Camille now? Joe, of course, the businessman nowadays, Will, but once gave me a free ice cream in Camille after Galway beat Tipperary in the league final in Limerick the year they won the All-Ireland, actually. I remember having a few quid in them at 6-1 after the game, thinking this could be our year. Been fairly quiet since then from Galway front, though.
What a day of double delight for you to get ice cream and a victory for the Galway Hurlers on the same day.
And in fairness to Camille, it was a complete gimmick, but you could basically you could pour your own ice cream, and I was like a kid and I was delighted with myself. But is Joe delighted with life? Could he come back, Will? Is it too late?
I think it's probably too late for this year. I thought Henry Shefflin would try and sit down with him and try and convince him to come back in, but given that he's now gone in as a coach with one of the Galway underage teams for this year, I think it's very unlikely he's going to be coaxed back out. And I think as well, in fairness to Joe, since he was 15 or 16 years of age, he's been playing at a very high level because he came straight into a Portumna team who were All-Ireland Club Championship contenders year on year in his teenage years, and then went straight in after being a prodigious minor. And he's one of those players who was so good at underage level and then delivered on all of that promise, becoming Young Hurler of the Year, going on to be Hurler of the Year. Nobody in Galway is going to forget what he did in 2017, particularly the point from the sideline in the semi-final, and then to finally lead the team over the line to end that wait since the late 80s to lift the Liam McCarthy. Like Joe Canning, despite his age, I think he's 33 this year, has a lot of miles on the clock. I'm sure at least for these 12 months he'll want to sit down, maybe heal up some of those injuries, take a little bit of time to himself, and then maybe Henry makes the call next year to see if Joe Canning comes back in. But like with players like Conor Cooney, like Evan Nyland, these players who are coming through as, you know, potential star forwards for the Galway team, it's not like they're lacking firepower in their forward line. It's just who's going to emerge as the leader at the front of their team that Joe Canning has been for the last decade.
Yeah, Evan Nyland, beautiful strike of the ball, could become that talisman in terms of frees and all that. But we'll touch on this in the Paul Mannion story in the back of a couple of the papers as well. Not committed to Dublin this year. It's not a great sign when, now Paul Mannion's 28, Joe's obviously a bit older, but it's not a great sign that players at that level are essentially reluctant to commit to inter-county for the year. It does give some indication of the challenges involved and just how much it takes over your life.
Yeah, like, again, you look at, say, if you want to look at Paul Mannion, where you've got two Dublin players right now, Jack McCaffrey and Paul Mannion, who should really be in the absolute peak of their career at 28 years of age. And both players have won so much over the last 10 years with Dublin, between Leinster titles and All-Ireland. And you would think that this year is the first time in a long time, definitely in 7 seasons, that Dublin are no longer the hunted and they become the hunters again, now that they're trying to reclaim the Sam Maguire. And yet they're going to be without two of their most important players. I think Paul Mannion would have come back in and been a really important player for Dublin if he decided to commit beyond Kilmacud Crokes' run, which could well go into mid-February, because there's a good chance that Kilmacud Crokes will go on and win the All-Ireland Club Championship final.
He's fit, I believe, tomorrow as well.
Yeah, like that's great news for them, because early in the week, Robbie Brennan, the Kilmacud manager, was saying that he hadn't trained since he picked up a knee knock in the game against Port Arlington just before Christmas. But Mannion took 10 days. He knows his own body. He thinks that the break was probably good enough to shake off that issue, and he's going to come straight back into the team against Naas. He's going to be a very difficult player to mark. He had a subdued first half in that semi-final against Port Arlington. I thought Robbie Piggott was doing a good job on him. And then in the second half, when the game was in the melting pot and when Kilmacud started to turn the screw in the Port Arlington half particularly, Paul Mannion's pace and his intelligence were so important getting them over the line. He scored 2 remarkable points. He had a big hand in the goal that they scored. I think he would have been a big asset for the Dublin footballers if he'd gone back in. His clubmate Shane Horn has not gone back in with Offaly this year, around about the same age. So it just goes to show it's a very difficult commitment, even in a condensed season where we've got the first year properly of the split season this year. Some players are finding it difficult to commit, and I think it's one of those where once upon a time players would have been shamed about the fact that they didn't go back in, and external pressures will be there if a player opted not to commit when there's still plenty of football or hurling left in them. Maybe opinion is changing on that slightly, but it's become a younger player's game. There's no doubt about that. You look at even the age profile of the Tyrone team that won the All-Ireland Championship this year, like a lot of young men that won that All-Ireland title, and I think it's probably unlikely we're going to see players going into their mid-30s anymore at inter-county level.
That's an issue we'll talk about with James Skehill as well. Galway have a couple of players into their 30s, edging into their 30s as well. I just mentioned a great article that Kieran Murphy wrote in the Times this week. He's on about the darts and how basically he couldn't really warm to the darts like other people, and he says, at root I believe the problem is one of sheer cowardice. What would happen if I added yet another sport to the roster to go with the GAA, the never-ending carousel of Premier League games, rugby internationals, European games and internationals, even, God help us, assorted late-night dalliances with the Ashes, the volume turned down low to hide my shame, the laptop shut closed with a bang to avoid discovery? Would an inflection point be reached, if not in my brain, then at least in my marriage? Now, the thing that struck out for me there was the never-ending carousel of Premier League games, and I do think we're at saturation point with football at the moment. I think football is essentially on the box too much, which is a very long-winded way of saying, are you excited about the FAI Cup? Because if there's one man that's excited about the FAI Cup, it's Phil Egan, who's going to be on the show talking. He is the most enthusiastic football supporter I think I know, full stop, Will.
Yeah, I think I'd be more excited about the FAI Cup rather than the FA Cup going into this weekend. It's amazing. I always used to love the third round weekend, Johnny, because you get to watch match of the day, and particularly when we were growing up, you get to see grounds that you probably wouldn't see all year, and regional news reporters doing the report on the games in the FA Cup because there's just so many to cover, and the interesting stories and the giant killing, and teams generally, particularly 20 years ago, would have played pretty much a full strength team when they go out in the third round, and everyone wanted to go as far as they could in the competition. In recent years, even sides in the championship have been playing weakened teams so that they're...
That absolutely wrecks my head, Will.
Yeah, and look, I would think that you'd want to have as long a run in the FA Cup as you possibly could. Like, it's still the oldest running cup competition in association football of all time, and there's huge prestige around winning it. But it's been so dominated by the top clubs because they've got stronger squads, and they're able to just take on more games than teams further down the football pyramid. And the excitement has been taken away even more this year, Johnny, I think because of the COVID situation and because games being lost in recent weeks in the Premier League, and then all the back and forth about the EFL Cup semi-final first leg this week between Arsenal and Liverpool. And there's different rules for every competition. So at the moment in the Premier League, if you've got 13 players not injured or suffering with COVID, you go ahead and play your Premier League game. But there's been so many games called off at short notice in recent weeks. Then for the Carabao Cup, they had a rule after Man City a couple of years ago where a semi-final will be refixed where possible within the calendar. And that's why we saw Liverpool get a postponement until 2 weeks' time for their first leg. And in the FA Cup, it's you have to play whoever you've got at the club this weekend. Postponements are not going to be given. So maybe that says a little bit about the prestige of the FA Cup as well.
It does, I think. And just briefly before Phil Egan comes in, Novak Djokovic, I've kind of gone a little bit sympathetic towards the big man because, like, as much as a one-star hotel is, it's a first world problem, it does sound like he's being made essentially a scapegoat by the Aussies at this stage. I mean, he's probably, like, his anti-vax, views are questionable, but at the same time, have you a little bit of sympathy for him?
I've got a little bit of sympathy for what's happened from a political point of view. So the Australian politicians definitely saw the way that the wind was blowing on this. The people in Victoria, and particularly around Melbourne, where they've had the longest cumulative lockdowns during COVID-19 over the last couple of years, were very unhappy about the idea that Djokovic was getting some kind of special treatment by getting a medical exemption to come into the country and to be able to play. Like, I think it's emerged and it's fairly clear that Novak Djokovic, who has been vaccine hesitant in recent years, has not taken a COVID-19 vaccine.
Yeah.
Now, he obviously had to explain one of the 3 reasons to get an exemption from the Independent Medical Board and those doctors who were appointed by Tennis Australia to get a right to play in the competition. Important to remember that does not equate to getting a visa to coming into the country. But before Novak Djokovic's flight even arrived in Melbourne, Scott Morrison, the Prime Minister in Australia, had decided to turn this into a political football and was ready with his backhand to send Djokovic out of the country straight away. Like, political interference kicked in before there was even a chance for Border Patrol to actually have a few questions with Djokovic in Melbourne Airport.
Ready with his backhand, is that like a tennis analogy?
I tried to fit a tennis analogy because I called it political football. I probably should have called it political tennis ball.
You did that in such a distinctly underwhelming way that it was just delivered with amazing poise. Like, I have to say, Will, at 7:40, it's a good start to the morning.
It was a one-handed verbal backhand. But like Scott Morrison is a guy at the moment, Johnny, who's in a position where he has seen his own ratings drop over the last 6 months or so, and it's election year in Australia. So when it's election year and you're a Conservative Prime Minister, you want to come across as the hard man who's going to make sure that Novak Djokovic can't come into the country. I thought Rafa Nadal's comments were very reasoned around this yesterday, which is that, Novak Djokovic does not have to decide to take a COVID-19 vaccine, but there are consequences when the rules of the competition and the rules to come into Australia state that you have to be vaccinated to arrive into the country or to have that medical exemption. I think Djokovic is very unlikely. He still has his appeal, but he's very unlikely, I think, to disclose whether it was a case of him having recovered from COVID, whether it's a heart condition or another adverse reaction to a vaccine. I think he's very unlikely to state that publicly. And as a result, I think Djokovic is unlikely to play in Melbourne in 2 weeks' time. And I think he will become an absolute poster boy for those who are unhappy about rules around lockdowns and vaccines anyway.
That's actually what's going to come out of it. But it would beg the question, like, Novak Djokovic, he goes over to Australia, he's on a tennis court, he's obviously social distancing by default on the tennis court, and no Aussie would want to go within 2 metres of him anyway, so he'd probably be grand, but that's for another day. OTBAM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with the new and improved razors. Here is what's coming up on the show this morning. And we start with Phil Egan on the FA Cup. Phil has joined us here and we'll talk to him in a minute. Club GAA, big weekend. Naas Crokes is going to be a fascinating one at Croker tomorrow evening. James Skehill talks that aforementioned Galway Offaly Walsh Cup game at 8:10. We'll get to sports pages at 8:30. JD will be in at 9 o'clock ahead of his return to Football Saturday tomorrow. The crappy quiz, I'm going to make a show of myself at 9:10. Luke Jensen at 9:30. Phil Egan, the county ground tonight, a ground you've actually been to.
Yeah, I was lucky enough to get the tour from the late Alan McLaughlin, an absolute gent. I went over to do an interview with him about the goal at Windsor Park. And
when was that?
This is probably 3 years ago. Because I was over doing a few different interviews, and Swindon is not that far from London.
It's not. I passed it on the train.
It's on your way to it. You'd go by Reading. It was almost.
I've been going to Cheltenham or somewhere. I don't know, but I passed the ground and I had like real nostalgia because just when I was getting into the Premier League was when Swindon had their 1 year in the Premier League. Yeah,
and actually when you walk around the county ground, you'll see pictures there of Jan Aga Fjordhoft.
Do you remember the celebration?
Yeah, he didn't get to do that too often because they didn't score many goals, but
he was their shining light. Did John Moncur in midfield. Do you remember Eric Cantona stamping John Moncur in the 2-2 draw at the county ground? And I hated Man United so much at the time that I was probably as happy that day as I was with any Liverpool performance. And if we're talking about FA Cups, that was around the time, of course, under Suey that Liverpool had a series of very bad defeats in the FA Cup to underwhelming opposition.
Yeah, I can remember the one against Bristol City, the one where the floodlights went out.
That's right.
And it came back to Anfield. I'm going to say Tinian scored the goal. It was a 1-0 win for
That's
Bristol.
A hell of a call. Do we have a poll on Twitter this morning on Off the Ball, and I want to hear what you think it is. Has the FA Cup lost its magic?
Yeah, we say this every season. Of course, it's going to be overwhelming. Yes, is what 75%. People are going to say. Yeah,
and there it is. It's actually it's come up as 0%, but there is a poll. It's 75% yes, 25% no.
Yeah. And I can understand that. And
25% maybe don't remember it.
Yeah, I think what happens with the FA Cup is if you're one of the big guns, you want nice draws, and then you get to the latter stages, and then maybe the schedule, because January is such a busy month. Obviously, it's ridiculous at the moment, and games are getting called off left, right, and centre. Will mentioned it there that there won't be FA Cup games called off this weekend, so that kind of adds a bit of intrigue. I think that you're going to see a lot of players that would never get a game for a Premier League club they're going to be playing this weekend.
That was kind of the beauty of the League Cup, and it's the same in Ireland to an extent, even though we haven't had it in recent seasons. That the League Cup became kind of cool because you saw these players play, but they wouldn't normally get the game. But the FA Cup shouldn't be that. It should be, and maybe I'm being nostalgic here, but as I was saying to Will, this idea, Will, of resting players in the FA Cup when say if you're a mid-ranking Premier League team, or as you say, a team in the Championship, why do you need to rest players in the FA Cup? I know players are essentially, they have a very busy schedule, but it should be a lot more than that because fans still want to win the FA Cup.
Yeah, I think some of the teams who are in the middle of the Premier League who are a long way away from the relegation places and still unlikely to qualify for Europe, or Europe would be a big ask. I always wonder why this isn't a competition that they try and go deep in. Wolves would be one of those teams you should keep an eye out for, who are very difficult to break down. They've just had a really good result at Old Trafford during the week. I know they struggle to score goals, but Wolves are a team who should be aiming to try and win this competition. Aston Villa should be trying to go on a long run through this competition. And yet I think there's a very good chance, whether it be in this round or in the fourth or fifth round, that they will play a weakened team to try and ensure that they've got their best possible side available for the Premier League the week afterwards. And that's why the top teams have been so dominant in this, because as Phil mentioned, if you're a top team and you can navigate your way through to the fifth round of the quarterfinals of this competition, it's even a little bit easier now that there's no replays to be played in round 3 or round 4, which probably should go in the way of the top sides. Therefore, once you get to that point, your better squad should kick in. And that's why we've had the semi-finals and the final dominated by the top teams in the Premier League. Look at how many times Chelsea, Arsenal have won the FA Cup in recent years.
To me, though, I want to go back to something there Will said about Aston Villa and a run in the... It sounds like Will has just given Villa a win against United on Monday.
Not quite, but you get my point, though, Phil, about these teams who are in that type of position. They're the sides who shouldn't play weakened teams.
I don't think they will. I don't think Gerrard will. I think this is a really good chance, and obviously United are, they're under serious pressure, and I don't think Ralph Rangnick can rest players either, because...
No. Yeah. Well, in fairness for Man United, winning the FA Cup would be something for them at this stage, and they might get a reasonable run in the competition. Man City tonight looked like they were decimated with injuries with COVID as well, so that's going to be interesting in the county round.
Yeah, and do you know what? When I watch these games as well, so Man City are obviously, they're missing 7 first team players. Pep Guardiola's not there as well. You want to see who's playing. You want to look at the next. Yeah. Is there another Phil Foden there? Is there someone that we're going to see? And that's kind of what I'm looking forward to over the weekend. So the fact as well, it's a Friday night. There's not much else on TV tonight.
You watch a lot of football.
Yeah.
Do you like the comment I made about Murph's comment about the carousel, the never-ending carousel of Premier League? Is that worrying for you? There's too much football on TV.
There is. Actually, it got to a stage. Remember when the project restart and there was no fans, so you could watch every game. And it got ridiculous. Also, as well, you were watching
behind
games,
closed doors.
Yeah,
so great.
It wasn't as good. You were kind of happy that football was back, but it did get to a stage where I had to say, I can't. It
was like that Sims episode where they're watching soccer and they're all in the stadium. They're like, yeah, and then they're just really bored after 2 minutes. You're like, there's too much of this.
What I found myself doing there was, you put the game on, but
you'd be detached.
You'd be walking around doing other things as well. You'd hear a noise from the TV. You'd look over. It was a goal or it was a chance. So, it was on, but it wasn't getting your full attention.
This is another thing, Will, that actually I've really noticed in recent years from a personal level, and I think in general, it's so many people now watch football or sport in general whilst on Twitter or on their phone.
Yeah, I mean, it's a point that Florentino Perez was making about the European Super League, that he was saying the next generation maybe don't have the attention span to sit down and watch a 90-minute game. But yeah, I think for a lot of people when they're watching sport now at this stage, it has definitely changed, that you'd have your Twitter stream open, you'd be looking for people who make jokes or potentially a GIF or a meme around the game that you're watching. And I think you are probably far more distracted than you were before. But then I think, as Phil mentioned, there's not that concentration around the fixtures that were on TV that once upon a time happened. And during Project Restart, something that I was very nostalgic for when it finally came back, we're having 4 or 5 games on at 3 o'clock on a Saturday.
Yeah.
Because it was a hard slog, lads, when there was a game at 12:30, a game middle of the day, 5:30, and then 2 evening games.
Well, first of all, the 12:30 game is one of my pet hates. I think, like, the atmosphere, it's actually statistically proven that there are fewer goals in that game because the atmosphere is obviously quite tame early in and they put really big games on as well. But like you mentioned, one of my memories when I was a kid was going into my father's Jeep to listen to 693 or 909 to listen to 5 Live on a Saturday. Of course, it would be off the ball now, but I remember distinctly Man United's win over Liverpool in the FA Cup final when Liverpool wore the white suits. Cantona got the goal. Was probably as depressed as I've ever been after a sporting event. That was the peak of the competition.
My brother, I think it was his communion that day.
Oh, wow.
There's a family photo.
Wearing a white suit as well.
No, but there's a family photo outside the church, and everyone's dressed to the nines. And I have a denim jacket on, but underneath it is a Liverpool jersey. I can't believe my mum let me wear a Liverpool jersey.
That would explain a lot about Phil Egan's subsequent life, I think. You've just gotten away with a lot on the sporting front.
Yeah. But
you were extremely depressed at 5 o'clock that day as well.
Yeah. Do you know what? Back then, when you were a kid, you really took the defeats to heart.
Yeah.
Whereas I think after a while, especially as a Liverpool fan, you got kind of used to it. And but there's some people still get so wound up about it. Even watching the big games, I tend to stay off Twitter now. I just try and watch the game.
Why do you need to be on Twitter during a game? Like, there's absolutely no need. But getting back to the FA Cup.
Yeah, FA Cup. So
there's a beautiful tie this weekend. Is all that's wrong with football, or much that's wrong with football, is Newcastle, and all that's right with football is Wes Houlihan, who turns 40 this year.
Yeah.
That's going to be beautiful, and it might be sold out as well.
Yeah, well, obviously Newcastle fans are excited because of the Saudi takeover. The FA Cup is something that it's probably not on their radar right now, and it probably goes back to something Will said there. Why shouldn't it be on their radar? Because, if they get a nice run,
it can bring confidence to players as well. Like, what did they won? One game in the league. So
they beat Burnley. They need to stay in the Premier League, and that's obviously what Eddie Howe has to do. But they'll fancy their chances, obviously beating Cambridge. Even though I'd imagine Wes Houlihan, will he start? He came off the bench last week. He had missed a few games as well. But I'd say Wes Houlihan in his prime, Newcastle fans would have loved a player like Wes Houlihan because just that ability to do something a little bit different. Is
he Will the greatest embodiment of what is wrong, what has been so wrong with the Irish football narrative and mentality in terms of how late it was? First of all, that he had to go such a circuitous route to make the top from Shelbourne, and when he played for Shells, it was a very, very physical league at the time, went via Scotland to England and eventually Norwich. But the fact that it was so late when Ireland appreciated him.
Yeah, and I guess to an extent the fact that Wes Houlihan has played so much of his best football probably post the age of 28 as well. Like he matured like a fine wine. And you saw last year with Cambridge, he's had a more limited role this season where he's been used off the bench a little bit more, but he was so crucial to their promotion last year. And yeah, I think there's a good point in there that we've never really trusted a player who can play like Wes Houlihan as a number 10 or someone who can carry the ball through midfield and link things up. And that's why when Wes Houlihan was on the bench for the Republic of Ireland team and maybe not getting chances at a time when we were creating precious little in front of goal, the people were crying out, not just Eamon Dunphy, for Wes Houlihan to get more time in the football pitch. And we will always have Wes's performances around Euro 2016. We'll always have that.
I was right behind
beautiful
him.
Goal in Paris.
The goal.
Right when he hit that one against Sweden. And it was just after half-time, so people missed that goal. And I've no sympathy for those people, by the way, that would come in.
You see that the Emirates is like, it's grim. It's grim at half-time. It's again, what's wrong with modern football.
Yeah, but as soon as he hit it, you were like, it's in. It was unbelievable.
So talked about Irish interest. The one that sticks out a mile here, to me anyway, West Brom, Brighton. Could we have Evan Ferguson?
Possibly. I mean, he's obviously been on the bench. And like Brighton are that kind of team now where I think they're looking ahead of them rather than over their shoulder, because Graham Potter's done a really good job. I watched them against Everton last weekend.
Mansfield Middlesbrough as well, which could be interesting for their on loan Aaron
Connolly as well. Hull Everton is an interesting one. That's on tomorrow at 5:30, because Hull are obviously a championship team. They're kind of down near the bottom, but there's so much pressure on Rafa Benitez. Obviously he's got a couple of signings, a couple of fullbacks in, but they've been absolutely dreadful. Personally, I don't think Rafa Benitez is necessarily the problem at Everton, but I definitely don't think he's the solution. I don't think he's the solution either. I don't think he should ever have been appointed Everton manager. I think that is a classic example of owners not being able to read the room properly. Like, did anyone honestly think, do you know what we need? We need a former Liverpool manager who once said things about us being a bit of a small club. And also as well, let's not forget, Rafa Benitez, as good a manager as he is and has been, his best days are behind him.
You have an 8 a.m. bulletin to read, but before you go, what is the proverbial trademark potential banana skin this weekend?
I mean, it's hard to pick one, because maybe that whole Everton one. Like Newcastle aren't going to trip up against Cambridge. United Villa's, obviously you can't put that into that category. Forest against Arsenal, kind of, that brings back that nostalgic feel of when Forest were a really good cup team. But Arsenal, you would imagine, will beat them quite comfortably. And even though Forest have had a revival under Steve Cooper since he replaced Chris Hughton, but they've lost a couple of games. One that I'm looking forward to, West Ham Leeds. Leeds have been dreadful in the FA Cup. Remember, they lost 3-0 to Crawley.
That's right.
Mark Wright got all the headlines, even though he essentially played about 3 minutes.
Yeah, that's right. That was a mad game.
They lost 3-0 and everyone's questioning where were Leeds going under Bielsa. They're still doing it. But I think West Ham are a team now that David Moyes would have an eye on a good cup run. They're still in Europe as well. They were obviously knocked out of the League Cup, but I think West Ham will beat Leeds.
Thanks a million for your time.
I'd love to talk more, but I said I've got...
Phil just loves to talk. How many games are you going to watch this weekend?
Do you know what? I'd probably maybe 3 or 4.
3 or 4. Will?
I'll watch a few for work, but I'm not overly excited. I'm looking forward to Villa United, actually.
You'll be watching Gaelic games?
Probably Saturday. So I'll be watching a bit of everything, though.
We've got a packed show coming up on OTB AM. We'll hear from Alan Quinlan. We've got the crappy quiz, and next, my fellow county man James Skehill talks about the potential All-Ireland winners this year, Galway or Offaly.
OTB AM. This is OTB Sports Radio. Off the ball.
And he also said to ask him about the Hummer golf buggy I saw him driving in Portugal.
Yeah, well, the Hummer golf buggy, it wasn't mine, it was a friend of mine's, and I rented his place, and that was his buggy to get about. So yeah, it was interesting. I was trying to keep my head down at times, but it should be. It was a little bit, yeah. Not sure what Roy Keane would have made of it.
Off the ball, weeknights from 7 and weekends from 1.
This is OTB Sports Radio, live 24/7 on the OTB Sports app.
Just reading up on the Clonmara story today, like, you're right, like, nutstar. It's absolutely incredible. But Patrice Diggin was speaking to Paul Keane in the Examiner, and just had this brilliant quote that Liz is due in less than a month. We were in dire straits that day at the semi-final. The same girl would have walked onto the field for sure. And they're saying that one of the selectors for Clonmara are going to have to stand beside her just to make sure that she doesn't go over the line this weekend to play in the All-Ireland final. So it's a remarkable story. Like, it's hard to get your head around it, isn't it? Like a club side having to struggle for players at that time of the year. It is just unbelievable.
It is amazing, and but that's the type of fairy tale. People talk about the club championship in sort of twee terms because in the past we've had a couple of months to maybe delve into it, and while some deem it disastrous that we're going to have to deal with the club game for longer in the future, I think it's great. These stories are at the bread and butter of what the games are about, and the spirit, and this is just something they've built up over a long time. It is disappointing for them that the Kilmiley hurling team are playing at the same time in Munster Championship. There are families involved in both here, and obviously partners and friends and things like that as well. That's a pity because you've got a very small hurling following that's going to be split, and you would love them to be at an All-Ireland final for a camogie team of this nature. A lot of them aren't going to be, unfortunately. But, that's just another one of those odds that's against them, and they will go, right, bring it on.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Yeah, you'll have heard in the ad break there for the Club Championship show, live every week across Off the Ball, brought to you by AIB, proud sponsors of the football, hurling and camogie All-Ireland Club Championships. Check out #the toughest for more. Darragh O'Connor, a good Waterford man. Will he have some hopes for the Daoise this year in terms of the hurling championship, or do Limerick just win?
I think Limerick, I won't say Limerick just win, but I think Limerick have to still be considered the very strong favourites to win the championship this year. Like, Waterford have definitely made progress under Cal and got to a point 2 years ago where they got to an All-Ireland final. So Waterford have been back on the ascendancy again. It was good to see Cork have a run to an All-Ireland final last season, albeit they looked a distance behind Limerick in the All-Ireland final. Limerick were just so impressive back in August in that decider. And look, Tipperary, with a change in management as well, will perhaps get a hope of a renewed season and getting that bit closer and maybe getting back to their 2019 level. And as we'll chat with James Skehill in a few minutes' time, Galway will be hopeful that last year was just a bit of a blip, and maybe the season before, and that again they can get back to contending against Limerick, because it's not that long ago that Galway were in an All-Ireland semi-final where, a couple of injuries aside, they pushed Limerick all the way in the last 4 contests. So I've said it before, I think Limerick need a good dance partner, perhaps to even enhance their legacy more, that if they can get a rival who can push them all the way and they have a few epic battles, it'll perhaps see them go down in history, even more loved than they perhaps are now. But then again, I do wonder, Johnny, if their success is sustained as it has been with Munster Championship, with the league and with the All-Irelands that they've been running off, at some point will people get sick of Limerick winning, and will the narrative become, Limerick don't go for goals, Limerick are maybe a bit over physical, I wish someone else would come through and win.
First of all, the sliotar is far too light at the moment, and I think that Limerick's ability to get points from all over the pitch is a major help. But secondly, Galway lost them by a point on a couple of occasions in recent years when Galway didn't really hurl at all for much of the game. So like there are hopes for Galway in terms of James Skehill. I mentioned Darragh O'Connor there. Niall Cronin, Darragh O'Connor and myself would have shared the press room at the racetrack on many occasions. Niall Cronin was involved with Naas. Did extremely well with them underage, had a brief stint with the senior team, and was speaking to me for years about the potential for Naas as a complete sleeping giant in Kildare. This year has been unbelievable for them. They're big outsiders against Crokes, and I suppose there was talk earlier on the week that Paul Mannion might miss the game. It's at Croker tomorrow, 5 o'clock, so it'll be an absolute cracker. Unfortunately for Naas, he is going to be fit to play, but this is the makings of a really, really interesting game.
Yeah, look, hopefully it's tight. We got 2 very entertaining Leinster semi-finals just before Christmas. The Naas Shamaliers game was a nail-biter. Went down to extra time after Eamon Callaghan scored a very late equaliser in the game. And the kind of romance of Club GAA, a player who had gone to Croke Park so many times with Kildare and lost big games, in his 40th year, kicks a point to send it to extra time where Naas get the victory in the end. And this is a Naas team, Johnny, who changed their management team late on within their championship campaign and have had a player-led team in charge of them for the Leinster Championship. And they've been scoring really freely. Like, they put in 7 goals in their first 2 games in the Leinster Championship. They finally managed to shake off the shackles of Shamaliers, particularly in the first half of extra time in that semi-final, which they probably shouldn't have won, but they'll feel maybe they've got out of jail a couple of times with the own goal that Tullamore scored in the last few seconds, which saw them go through in the first round, that win against Shamaliers, and now they can have a cut in their first ever Leinster final against the team who many feel will be the All-Ireland champions, which is that star-studded Kilmacud Crokes team. I think it's huge news, though, that Paul Mannion is fit to start tomorrow, because without him, he's so key to how Kilmacud move the ball in their forward line.
Like, in terms of the dangers then for Kilmacud Crokes, they're obviously a hot favourite. Like, who are Naas's kind of sharp shooters that could score enough points which they'll badly need against Crokes to actually win this game?
Well, see, the thing is, they have a core group of players who are a little bit older, like Owen Doyle, like Eamon Callaghan.
The boy leper.
Yeah, and that's the thing. They've got so much experience through inter-county and also club. Many people have been focusing on the fact that the Naas players have been coming through from an underage machine that they've had in recent years, and some of these players have been watching at schools level coming through into the team, but they've still got a core group of very experienced players. I think they play really nice football, Johnny. I think sometimes in the game against Shamaliers they retreated too far and allowed the Wexford champions to have a little bit too much possession, and Naas were happy enough to play on the counter. But maybe that style of football might actually work quite well against Kilmacud Crokes, who will try and force the issue. The thing about Crokes, though, they're very unlikely to kick as many wides as they did during the game against Portarlington. They left 20 scoring chances behind them, many of which were gilt-edged chances. And some of their shot selections were poor against the Portarlington team who defended well. They put up the bolted back door in front of them and said, look, come and attack us. But Kilmacud sometimes made some poor decisions. And it was the aforementioned Paul Mannion who sometimes ran into very clever positions to actually give them the win when they decided to press up a bit in the second half. So I think Crokes probably have to be considered, the favourites going into this game. But hopefully Naas can put in a performance that's a bit more like what they put in extra time, albeit so much of the chat around that, Johnny, was around the rule where you get a black card late in the game, you're punished by the black card into extra time. Well, if you've had a player red carded, you still get back to 15 at full time, which I always think is a crazy rule. I think there should be more of a consistency in that. I think you should still play with 14 players in extra time if you had someone sent off.
We'd Coach Murphy on during the week, given his Premier League team of the half season so far. Coach O'Callaghan, what do you do with Paul Mannion here? I mean, whoever is marking him, will he even sleep tonight? And do they just effectively double, treble, 4-time team him? What do they do?
Look, potentially at this level, when you're up against a player that's that much of a superstar and a multiple all-star, double coverage is definitely an option. I think Naas will hope that systematically they're able to stop him, and maybe to make the supply into the forward line poor is what they look to do. I think there's a lot from the first half blueprint from Portarlington that Naas may well be able to look at when they look at the video and say, right, if we can get a system like that and make it very difficult for Kilmacud to do anything inside our 45, maybe that's the way to try and keep Paul Mannion quiet, because he relishes when the game stretches. And that's what happened in that semi-final. When a bit of space was there and when Portarlington were a bit fatigued, he was able to open his legs and get the ball moving with his feet. And that's the one thing that Naas have to watch out for, is that when Kilmacud invariably break themselves, they don't want to leave space for Mannion to run into.
And maybe there'll be Dublin GAA supporters tomorrow who will want to go to Croke Park to see Paul Mannion, because they're not going to get the opportunity this year. We should say that Pádraig Pearse's victory over Mount Ballymoylaw was completely overshadowed, and obviously there were controversial decisions, but by hook or by crook, to borrow the phrase, they're playing Knockmore, which would be a fascinating Connacht final as well.
Yeah, Tommy was making this point in the Club Championship show yesterday that understandably everything was overshadowed by what happened to Jerome Henry, the referee, towards the end of it, and the potential suspensions, some of them that could be up to 2 years that may fall from the end of that for some of the players from Ballymoylaw. But Pádraig Pearse has dug out a result in that game when many people would have expected that it was Mount Ballymoylaw who would go through. They're a team who got the Dailies with all their experience of Roscommon running through that team. They've got a very experienced manager in Pat Flanagan, who's been an inter-county manager with both Westmeath and with Offaly, and has had various different teams across counties that have been successful. And he's a guy who's a stager that got them to a 2019 final when Pádraig Pearse had their breakthrough that year. They lost out to one of the best club teams of all time in Corofin, and they'll be hoping to go up against a Knockmore team who've been tested in their 2 games so far, Johnny. Going into the water break against Torlestrand, they were 2 points down. They finished the game strongly, the Mayo champions, to come through. Maybe they have a slight advantage that the game is in Ballina when it comes to this weekend. But that one is a very hard game to call, and I think it's pretty much 50-50 with the bookmakers going into it. And then I'm sure we'll talk about the hurling a little bit more with James Skehill in a moment, but a cracking Munster hurling final in potential this weekend, where Kilmallock, who dismantled Middleton in the semi-finals, kept them scoreless for 18 minutes of the first half against a Ballygunner team who were free scoring against Ballyea in the quarter-final. And then in the semi-final, again, a game that was probably overshadowed because of the 2 red cards, the Lockmore Castellini players, the McGraths who were sent off during it. But still, Ballygunner found a way to win. And I was looking at Pádraig Manny's interviews with the newspapers today, and he was saying he does not care a jot about those who have been criticising Ballygunner in recent weeks, because there were plenty of people, and I didn't like the fact that 2 Ballygunner players went straight to the umpire once John McGrath had given the slap to the hand and tried to get a red card produced. And some people were unhappy with the idea of maybe Ballygunner players going down to ensure they got advantages during the fixture. All Ballygunner care about is winning. They've had 1 Munster title in recent years when they've been the consistent team probably in Munster since 2015. It's all about getting over the line at Páirc Uí Chaoimh for them on Sunday afternoon when they go up against Kilmallock. So that should be a great one. It's very hard for anyone to run a dynasty really in the Munster Hurling Championship. I think 6 is still the top amount of titles that's ever been won, which is Finbar's, and that's going back quite a while. And this is, potentially a really, really good game between Ballygunner and Kilmallock at the weekend.
Coach O'Callaghan is vaguely extolling the dark arts there, I think.
Yeah, look, I think you probably have to use some of them along the way. Like, I will be the first person who will be critical about the fact that your teams are taking every advantage going into a game. But even as much as we try and be romantic, or as Dara said, a little bit twee about the club game, teams will do what they need to do to get over the line. And if you're a Ballygunner player who's played in 3 or 4 Munster finals and come out on the wrong side of results, you won't mind if you have to take every advantage to try and get over Kilmallock this weekend. And if anyone gets a chance to listen back to the podcast, we Paddy O'Brien from Kilmallock on. Again, a slightly crazy story. Johnny, he's getting married today ahead of the game on Sunday. It's amazing how this seems to have worked out, that a lot of people push their weddings back into this year because of the restrictions. Then their club does well, and they've had to navigate weddings in the middle of very important championship games. But he thinks it actually might be a bad thing for him, because he can focus on the wedding and everything around that. And then he only has 2 days to think about one of the biggest games of his life, where he's going to try and win himself a second Munster Club medal at the weekend. And you heard as well from Dara about the Clonmara story, where they have 17 players available for their All-Ireland defence against Raharney on Sunday afternoon, because some players weren't able to be registered, because this competition goes back to 2020. I know it's being finished in 2022 now. And their captain from 2019 will be togging out, despite the fact that she's 8 months pregnant, to ensure that they will have at least 15 players available, because they only had 14 to play in the semi-final where they won against that league. So this time of year, I know we've got the inter-county coming back, but there's always so many crazy stories in the club that are just so intriguing.
Well, I mean, the photo opportunities there, to put it mildly, are off the charts. And we will talk to James Skehill shortly, but it's... I don't know. I think the club championship it has a special place, I think, in the sense that there's maybe a lot of cynicism about kind of football at inter-county level at the moment. It's so dominated by a select number of teams. Hurling isn't far off at the same time, and you get I don't know, is it more magic kind of lives on a bit more in the club championship?
Maybe a little bit. Also, the fact that we're living in an era where we may well have seen the best club football team of all time in Corofin, and their dynasty is maybe coming towards an end. And at the same time, we've got a Ballyhale Shamrocks team in the hurling particularly, who are just magic, Johnny. They're going to try and win back-to-back titles. I have never known a forward line in club hurling to be as strong as they have right now. And this is a club who've had players like Henry Shefflin, who've had Michael Fennelly along the way. But to have the last 2 young hurler of the year, also to have TJ Reid and to have Colin Fennelly in the same forward line in a club is just remarkable. And that's not to include the inter-county players that they have at pretty much every other line of the team. It's not to say that St. Thomas won't take them out on the 23rd of January, because St. Thomas have been really impressive so far this year. But we might be living through one of the great club teams in Ballyhale Shamrocks of all time right now. And the bizarre part is, they probably should have been knocked out a few weeks ago in Tullamore against St. Rynas, where they had won what was called the Ballyhale Mary play at the end, a 65, which they were able to drop in, that was scrambled home for a goal in the end by Owen Cody. And that was enough to see them go through to a Leinster final, where they won by a record margin against Cluck Ballacalla and looked so impressive at Croke Park a couple of weeks ago. I think we might be living in an era of greatness, which adds that little bit of extra intrigue about watching the club championships over the next few weeks as well.
Who wins the football championship in the club?
I don't know. You see, I like Kilcoo, and I've been impressed by Kilcoo all year. And they, even with some of the dark arts that were seen in that final a couple of years ago against Corofin at Croke Park, could have easily won that game and could have easily been lifting the Andy Merrigan Cup. And I think if they get a run and come through and go into an All-Ireland semi-final, they'll be very difficult to beat. But I take the point that if Kilmacud Crokes can hit full steam, they probably have the best team left in the competition. And yeah, you probably would edge towards Kilmacud Crokes, but I think Kilcoo would give them a right good battle along the way. And I would have to say about Kilmacud, watch the Dublin final, watch the game against Port Arlington. They didn't quite play to their full potential in either of those fixtures. It's whether they can be clinical and put in a full 60-minute performance, and then we'll know a lot more. We might know a lot more about what the potential destination of the Cup will be after that game tomorrow between Crokes and Naas.
What sort of crowd in Croker?
I don't know. It's probably going to be just a few thousand, you would think. Like, Kilmacud's obviously like a massive population area, and they will bring a crowd along. And similarly, like, Naas is very well populated. I wonder how many neutrals will go to Croke Park at 5 o'clock on a Saturday when the game is on RT television, though. Like, it's an easy one not to travel in early January. And I think for a lot of GAA supporters who would be, say, neutrally inclined, if you're really kind of excited about going to a game, they'll probably go to matches in the pre-season competitions tomorrow and watch their own county. But the other good news, if you are a fan, you want to be at home, aside from the matches that are on TV, there's a load of games being streamed this weekend. There were issues with Kerry and Limerick, which resulted in Munster GAA having to give refunds. I know Owen Shane was one of the people who was stuck at home that couldn't get access to watch his beloved Kerry during the week.
There was an internet meltdown, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think there was just so many people registered to actually watch the game that the servers had an issue, and then a few hundred people were able to get through after that. But in the end, Munster GAA just had to put the game up for free and give refunds all around. So hopefully with the streaming services this weekend, and even with the All-Ireland Camogie finals being on their YouTube as well, it's never been as easy to have access to games than we would have had before. Hopefully we don't end up in the same positions we talked about with the Premier League earlier, where it's burnout that there's just too many games that are viewable.
Yeah.
But I think it's been one of the upshots of the pandemic that more GAA is now available to watch than ever before.
Of course, JD is such a consummate professional, you wouldn't have known on the day, but I was late for one of the Saturday shows recently because I was delayed watching the Connacht junior ladies final because my sister was playing for St. Brendan's, and I paid the tenner to watch the stream. The commentary was brilliant, but it went well into injury time, so I ended up being late. But it was amazing to watch. Like you're paying for a stream. I think the game was somewhere in Mayo. I think they were playing the Sligo champions and won by a point. And for the junior ladies, it was the drama and the excitement was unbelievable. James Skehill, you've played a few interesting games in your time yourself, but would you like to be in Ballinasloe this weekend?
I've played a few games, right, yeah, but I think now my time has passed, so I'll be a happy spectator anyway. Yeah,
like any part of you a little bit regretful you're not involved with big King Henry at the helm?
I'm not going to lie, there was a little bit of an itch, if you want to put it that way, probably a 2% itch, but that quickly went away as Christmas came along and I heard the guys were training hard. But I'll tell you what it was, it's an exciting time. I think there was a lot of, I suppose, documented negativity with Galway going back into the last autumn and into last winter, and that's truly been fixed now. So I think the whole county as a whole is excited. They're looking forward to see what kind of team Henry puts out and what kind of pattern they play. I think the game itself will just be an introduction. I think he's for himself more so than the players to see what he has in front of him, because you can only gain so much from training and some trial games. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of team he puts out, what way they go about their business, and hopefully they'll just put in a good performance this afternoon.
And obviously the King Henry Fennelly narrative is fascinating as well going into it.
Yeah, I was trying to think. I was racking my brain there yesterday even to see was the club mates that ever faced off in an inter-county hurling management situation, and I still can't grasp. Maybe Jimmy Barry Murphy and John Allen being St. Finbarr's club mates, but beyond that, I couldn't think of anyone. So that's a fascinating situation too. And you think I'm just putting myself in my own situation. If I was to face off with a club mate, it would be, you nearly want to beat them more. You know what I mean? Just because they're in the locality, in the community, you'd nearly want just to. Obviously, there's a professional basis to this, don't get me wrong, but certainly it would probably be close friends, possibly neighbours, that you want to get one over them.
How do Offaly approach this, Will?
I think this is a difficult one, Johnny, because I think Offaly's year is going to be determined on what happens in 3 or 4 months' time, as opposed to the body of work through the Welsh Cup and the National League. Offaly have got a very difficult group in the National League, which starts with Galway. Bizarrely enough, in a few weeks' time, the teams will meet again in the first round of the league. I think the blueprint for Offaly's year has to be, Johnny, very similar to Westmeath last year, with the exception of one game. So Offaly are coming out of the Christie Ring and from Division 2, where they played really well last year, albeit it was a shortened Division 2 and there wasn't a final, so it was a sprint as opposed to the normal format. They won the Christie Ring at a canter last season, played really well in the final against Derry, 49 scores on the day. They'll be expecting to be very competitive in the Joe McDonagh, and they'll be hoping that playing Division 1 hurling, even if it results in defeats like Westmeath had last year in a similar grouping of teams, that will actually give them a leg up when they play against primarily Division 2 teams in the Second Flight Championship later in the year. There's a lot of injuries that Offaly have had to deal with, and like Oisin Kelly, who was their best player last year and was named the Joe McDonagh Player of the Year, got injured at football training with Belmont just before their championship quarter-final, and he's going to be out until the end of the season with the cruciate. So maybe he can come back in for some of the Joe McDonagh, but it's even a difficult ask to have him back fit for that. And it's going to be a very difficult baptism for them going back up to Division 1, given that they've been hurling in Third Flight Championship and in Second Flight League now for quite some time. And my worry would be that they'll go to Ballinasloe and get a bit of a scutcheon at the weekend. It's important that I think they don't take a heavy defeat, but it's going to be a huge step up in intensity, physicality compared to where they were playing last year with a primarily fairly young team.
And a bit of a scutcheon, as Will calls it there, James, really isn't good to either of these.
No, it's not. I think from Offa's perspective, really what they want is, if you're Michael Finlay, you want to see a competitive nature for the whole game. Like, yes, there could be a vast difference in quality amongst teams. There could be a high score on Galway's perspective. But really, if I'm Michael Finlay, I want to see Offaly trudging at Galway for 75 minutes regardless of the scoreline. At least then he can build on that. You know, if they throw in the towel, let's say, after half time or with 40 minutes gone, that does no team either good. So I think both teams are looking for competition. Games are far better than training, as you all know. Conditions will be irrelevant because the pitch in Ballinasloe can take a bit of rain. So we're expecting to have a good surface. So I think both managers will be looking at the game with an eager anticipation to get started. Do
you buy into the narrative that Galway, which is essentially the prevailing narrative, is that Galway have underperformed in recent seasons, or were they simply not good enough? What's going on in the county? What's the expectation this year?
I think it's an amalgamation of both, to be honest. You know, like I have no problem admitting that I was part of teams that we know we had the quality in terms of player, but we just didn't put it together on the day, you know. And I think that happens when a team loses like this. Look in the mirror first of all and see where do we go wrong inside, you know, before you go blaming anybody else. And 9 times out of 10, you know, from Galway's perspective, we simply didn't click on the day. We didn't perform well together. We made some, you know, unforced errors, and that just at a very high level when you're playing high quality teams. You know, the margin of error is so small, the percentage of difference is so small that 1 or 2 big instances or errors in the game could result in a defeat. You know, that's the way it is. But I think from Galway's expectation this year, there's a lot of games coming up. I think it's our nature that we want to win everything, obviously. Can we win everything? I'm not sure. Like, potentially, if we win every game from now until the end of May, we'll have played 17 games, you know. So there's a lot of games coming up. There's going to be challenges in terms of, you know, COVID is obviously going to present its own issues. Can all the players avoid that? Hopefully. Every player, every squad, I would hope. You know, can we avoid injuries? Like, is our squad deep enough, you know, that we can carry a big injury to a big player? I don't know. Like, I think there's going to be a bit of a small bit of a rebuild. You'll still have the same, you know, 10 or 11, you know, guys who were highly influential in the squad, and then they'll be supported by a couple of new guys, I'd imagine. So I'm hoping for a clean bill of health throughout the course of the World Cup, the league, the championship, and then we'll see where we go. I think at a minimum, you know, you're looking at a World Cup final, you're looking at a league semi-final, and you're looking at a Leinster final. That's what I'm thinking, to be honest. And I think when you have someone of the calibre of Henry over the squad who has got a winner's mentality, that's obvious. I think they'll be the minimum stage we have to get to also.
Will mentioned Evan Ireland, who's actually 24 this summer. Who are the young players that Galway could introduce to replace, as has been referenced, in the build-up to the game? Some players obviously getting on a bit. Big Joe not in the panel this year at the moment, anyway. Who are the young lads to look out for?
Well, I wouldn't say young lads. I would say new guys who may have not been introduced to the first 15, you know, because the first 15 have been so strong for so long. But I am expecting a big year off Evan. He had a very good club championship for Clanbridge. You know, will he take over the free taking duties? That remains to be seen. He needs to nail down his first 15 position first.
He'd remind me a bit of Ger Farher, the way he strikes the ball.
Yeah, left-sided, stand over, a single step strike, and he's extremely, extremely accurate from anywhere from 75 yards. You know, and that nowadays is extremely important. You look at Gillette, Horgan, TJ Reid, they don't miss Reid. You know, so you have to have a good free taker to keep the scoreboard ticking. But I won't say new players as such, but I'm looking for a really big year of Conor Whelan and Brian Buchanan. You know, the two guys are two excellent players, two very influential players. I'm just looking for them to go up a step again and kind of carry the forward unit for Galway, you could say.
And how could you write the narrative of when Galway eventually play Kilkenny and the two boys on the sideline, and just like the hurling championship, you mentioned Limerick might have an unassailable advantage, but it's built up to be an absolute cracker.
Yeah, like, it couldn't have been said any better, Johnny, when we had a feeling that these two were probably going to meet either at the very end of the round robin or at the very start. So weekend one, the bank holiday weekend, it's going to be Galway against Kilkenny to kick off the Leinster Championship, where the winners are going to be in a really strong position to get to a Leinster final. The losers are going to be playing catch-up straight away. It's Cody against Shefflin. That's a game that's going to need absolutely no hype whatsoever. And we'll have a good idea of where Galway and Kilkenny are at after the league at the end of this, because, you know, with the way things are with the split season, it's a bit weird going from a league into another league format in a way where you play Division 1 and then you go into a round robin, which is essentially a league to decide the knockout stages of the championship. But I will admit, over the last couple of seasons, and I don't know how you feel about this, James, I kind of missed the round robin section of the two provincial championships a bit.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly. I know, even from a playing perspective, they were excellent. You had set games coming up. You had a minimum of 5 games, and it was made the best team win over the course of that group stage, you could say. I think that gets lost a bit in the recent, knockout situation whereby, anyone can play bad in the day. We saw that with Galway and Dublin. Anyone can play bad, but like the group stages gives you a chance. And I do think over the course of 5 games, the best teams usually come out on top. I think from Galway's perspective, they've got a pretty okay draw. They have to go away to Wexford, but in terms of teams coming to Galway, Kilkenny and Dublin, I take that because Dublin itself, Carnell Park is just a place to play, as we know, as Northern Park. So again, as I said earlier on, I'd be expecting a final from Galway.
It's fair to say Galway have a checkered history with managers not from the county, right? And when Micheál Donoghue, when they won the All-Ireland, Micheál Donoghue, those epic scenes with his dad after crossing the Shannon, like quintessentially Galway, you'd even get emotional thinking about it now as a Galway man. Obviously, James, people will expect that King Henry wants the Kilkenny job down the line. Is there any sense in the Galway camp that he's only here to progress to get that eventuality, or will this be total commitment from the man?
Well, I think it'd be a fool to think that he's going to stay in Galway forever. So I think obviously people are going to know that he's going to go at some stage, but I think the man he's driven to carry out a 2-year term. I think he's fully focused on what's in front of him in Galway. I don't think the supporters are thinking that far ahead in that he's going to bail out. I don't think he's going to do that at all. I think he's an extremely driven man. He wants to be as professional as possible. It's a great opportunity for him as a person, as a manager in his young managerial career, let's say, to go on to, I suppose, better things closer to home, if you want to call it that. But there's no, again, I go back to the point I made earlier, there's real anticipation and real excitement in Galway, and that comes with Henry, I think it's a really good appointment. And that provides, I suppose, a fresh rejuvenation for everyone in Galway, players and supporters alike. So we're looking forward to it. And looking forward to the next 2 years, to be honest.
From Ballyhale and Thomastown, what do we know from, his reputation precedes him as even not only as a player but as a manager? What makes him special as a manager? What could potentially make him special enough to bring Galway back to winning the Lee McCarthy?
Yeah, well, I think the biggest thing from his perspective is he's done it all. Let's say he's been involved for Kilkenny with a great number of years, and obviously in his young stages of Kilkenny, he was more watching and playing, as opposed to the latter stages of his career. He was probably assisting in a captaincy role and liaising with Brian Cody, etc., for maintaining standards and I won't say team selection, obviously, but standard of play, etc. So I'd say he's seen both sides pretty well. Ballyhale, he goes into the club manager. I don't care anybody says that. I saw written on Twitter recently about I'm sure anyone would win with that Ballyhale team. That's utter nonsense. You have any championship win. It's a difficult championship to win, no matter what clientele you have under your jurisdiction. So I think for him going to Ballyhale, winning the championship a couple of times, and then going to Thomastown, which was kind of a bit from left field, I didn't expect that myself. So it just shows he's not shying away from challenges or from difficult positions, and as you can see, he's taken over Galway. And I expect him from a playing perspective, I'd imagine he'd keep it simple, a Kilkenny style of hurling, win your own ball, win your own contest. Don't get hold up on your own man and then go from there.
Is it fair to say that there's probably universal acclaim for this appointment in Galway, whereas there wouldn't have been if Davy got it?
Yeah, I think there would have been a different dynamic, to be honest, guys, if Davy got it. As I said a moment ago, there's quite a lot of positivity around the Henry appointment because of he's such a glittering career. He's a very, very, what you'd say, personal man, but what I see, I've only ever spoken to the man once.
What did you say to him?
And I don't even know how sober I was.
Neither does he.
But he comes across a very nice person, very gentlemanlike, family man, as you can see. And, he's intimidating in his own way because of what he's done in his own career. On that pitch, you could say. So that was a nice appointment. I think with Davy, I don't think I probably would have been the same situation. I think it would have been probably a more negative spin on it, and with a bit of drama coming to Galway. So I was quite content to hear Henry got the job.
There you go, Will. If James had been a bit nicer over the few points, he might have invited him back into the panel.
There you go, a chance to come back in to help with the goalkeeping situation and maybe provide some competition. I was thinking as well, James, when it comes to the style of hurling that Shefflin is likely to play with Galway, they'll have to wait for the St. Thomas players to come back, and who knows, it could be more than a month, it could be a few weeks before those players are available to play again. But for the best part, are Galway well set up to play that Kilkenny style of hurling, or maybe that Ballyhale style of hurling that we saw Shefflin play as a manager?
Yeah, I do think simplicity is key for me. I think when we introduce too much information or too much, I suppose, difficulty around game plans, it can nearly flood players' minds sometimes. And I think from a Galway perspective, like if we stick to a simple style of play where we try, keep a tight back unit and try to create a whole host of space up in the forward unit, we certainly have the players to do that. Like, we've great defenders who can win their own ball and win their own contests, and when we've got attackers who can make their own space and take their own scores. So I think a simple game plan like that would suit us. Now I'll also say that if there's a bit of ingenuity from Henry towards the game plan, our guys can certainly take that on board and implement it too. But I'd be expecting from the outset, especially from the first week in January on for the next 4 or 5 weeks, that you'd see a simple style of hurling whereby, I suppose, Henry trying to get a look at what he has in front of him, and it's a case of, as I said, win your 50-50 contest and let's see who will have.
And it seems like, based on the amount of times that he was photographed at matches as well, James, he's been out soaking up quite a bit of info about Galway hurling during the end of the club championship and the late stages of year 2021.
Yeah, like, if I was to take, theoretically, if I was to take the Kilkenny job tomorrow morning, like, I would know very little players beyond that of Kilkenny squad. So I think Henry probably would be in a similar situation. He's obviously got a couple of Galway guys with him, and Jamie Dyson and Kevin Lally on the sideline, who have their own knowledge of the Galway club scene, obviously. But I think from Henry's perspective, he'd want to come up and see with his own eyes, and see the style of hurling that's produced in the club game. If there's any player that he may have seen that wouldn't necessarily be in the limelight of the senior squad, you could say. So I think he's certainly got off to a good start in attending games. And again, when he attended the games, there was great positivity from the crowd, who welcomed him in with open arms. So I think he's got a good start in terms of what he's seen in front of him. And they've got a good training block done pre-Christmas. So again, I repeat myself, like, everyone is really looking forward to this year.
Just my last question for you. This is the one thing that I don't enjoy about hurling at the moment. I think there are far too many scores. That might sound daft, but any thoughts on the sliotar?
Oh, the sliotar, yeah. How much time do we have?
Yeah. we have to answer this in about 10 seconds, actually.
To be honest, guys. No, I think we touched on this before. I do have an issue with the sliotar I don't have the issue with the weight. I have an issue with the rim size.
Right.
I do believe that if you rewind back 20 years and you put, a Limerick team or a Cork team or a Galway team beside, a Limerick team, a Cork team or Galway team back then, I think you'll see the S&C are poles apart.
Yes.
So I don't think people are giving enough consideration to the size of the player, the power of the player, and also the advance in probably the hurls, but So all these things accumulate, and people just look at the scores and then they point to the ball straight away. But I think you have to look at what's striking the ball and what's in control of striking the ball. All those things put into play. But I think a start is certainly the rim size. The rim size nowadays are way too small. They're almost like a baseball / tennis ball. So there's no real, I suppose, wind influence, if you like, or whereas just the velocity of the ball just goes away from me in no time. Whereas in a few years back, where the rims were, 2 or 3 mil, not the major we're talking here, we're not talking taking the hand off yet, but at least it would slow it down a small bit and kind of curtail 100-yard scores.
Fascinating stuff. And just to finish up then, there's no chance of you and Big Joe coming back then?
My body won't be able to do it. I won't speak for Joe, like, he's his own man, but I certainly, when you get a taste of a break, I don't want to give it up. Yeah.
Have you any inkling at all he might come back?
I don't. Truthfully speaking, I haven't spoken to the man in months. I don't know what he's doing. I know he's involved with the minor squad, assistant for Healy on whatever. It could be a coaching role, it could be whatever type of role he's taken up. So I would doubt there'll be a possibility of come back. He said himself that once he's done, he's done. So I'd say I'll hold him true to his word.
Do you know, finally, this is one of these iconic images from a game I was at when Galway lost to Dublin, the Leinster Championship. How many years ago was that in Parnell Park?
Ooh, that was 19. Not 19 years ago, 2019.
19. So, obviously that game, Galway only were knocked out because the other game had to be a draw. And I remember all the Galway fans started looking up to Henry Shefflin, who was doing, he had the headphones on, he was doing RT at the time, and he gave the news it was a draw. And the feeling around the ground among Galway fans, couldn't believe it. I think it was June and Galway were out the championship. But the point Joe got when he came off the bench that day, it was a controversial point actually, it may not have gone over. The roar I heard that day, James, in Parnell Park, I've never heard anything can't like it for 12,000 fans. You can imagine if Joe came back at some stage this year.
Oh God, yeah, I had to lift the roof off the place. But he had come back from a long injury spell, if memory serves me correctly. I think he got injured in the league semi-final against Waterford. I'm open to correction. So he has battled back, kind of a race against time really, to get back to have some sort of part to play in the championship. And I suppose, to be honest, we were struggling that game. We were struggling for the vast periods of the game. Dublin struck a couple of goals and things were going against us. He came on. First of all, him running on the pitch gave a bit of an uplift to the supporters, which didn't give an uplift to the fans or to the players. And then when he got a score out the left-hand side, that just kind of, it thought we'd gain a bit of momentum back then. But those were too good in the day. Probably weren't good enough. Simple as that.
Top man.
Yeah.
OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. Will, I've deep concerns going forward that essentially all children are going to sound the same. They'll basically be brought up looking at YouTube. They'll have a quasi-American Irish accent and you won't know whether they're from Ballygunner or Ballyhale. James Skehill has a Galway accent and always will.
He does, yeah. No, it's a strong Western inflection on his voice and speaks very passionately about Galway hurling. And I think as hurling fans, we're intrigued to see whether Galway can come back to the fore this year. I think last year it was almost psychological rather than personnel, the underperformances that they put in.
I'd agree with that.
In the Dublin game, and then also the way that they were blitzed by Waterford to go out of the championship. Like, they went out incredibly tamely, while at least when you look back at 2019 and that final day madness in the Leinster Championship group stage, that Galway were still competitive and not too far off the top teams in Leinster that year, but they looked well off the pace in the Waterford game last season. So I think Henry Shefflin's man management might be as important as the tactical innovations that he might bring in over the course of 2022. And again, as a hurling fan, let's hope that Tipperary and Galway particularly can get back to a level to try and compete with Waterford and Limerick, who've been the standard bearers over the last couple of years. Cork will be hoping that it wasn't just one bad summer, Johnny. And then we'll see where Kilkenny are at and whether they can compete with the very top again. Because we still remember in 2019, Limerick were beaten by Kilkenny in the semi-final when Kilkenny played absolutely out of their skins. So even though people may well have doubts about Brian Cody still being the manager of the team, and has he been there for too long, Cody has still managed to get something out of this team in recent years, whether that was Leinster titles, that comeback against Galway in the Leinster final a couple of years ago, winning the National League a few years ago as well. Write them off at your peril, really. And look, I think from a purely footballing perspective, I'm disappointed I can't go along to watch Offaly and Dublin in the O'Byrne Cup tomorrow, because the Offaly under-20s are about to make their breakthrough because of circumstance more than anything, because Offaly have a few of their key players away between the army and travelling, and in the case of Shane Horn opting out for the year. There's 11 of that All-Ireland under-20 team from last year who are on the panel for tomorrow's game against Dublin, and quite a few of them are probably going to get blooded ahead of time under John Mahon and Tomás O'Shea. So I kind of love this time of year. There's a blank page out in front, and this is why we go along to watch these pre-season games.
Were you any good to hurl, Alan Quinlan?
I wasn't too bad, Johnny, no. I wasn't too bad. I was certainly grew up in a county that you had to take a hurley into your hand and try it out anyway. But I did play lots of hurling when I was younger, yeah. Loved it.
Alan is, of course, host of the Red 78 podcast. Difficult time to be a rugby fan at the moment.
Well, it is, I suppose. It is challenging where all these fixtures are going to end up between the URC and the Champions Cup, which is due to get back. Champions Cup next weekend again. And will there be a format change? Will these games go ahead? It's kind of crazy at the moment, but it's the same in all sport at the moment. So hopefully it passes pretty soon and they find weekends for these postponed games.
Let's get straight to it. Your back row depth chart.
Yeah, my back row depth chart for Ireland. Where should we start?
Let's start at number 6, Quinny. We'll go 6, 7, 8 here.
Yeah, well, look, I was trying to think over this. There's I went through all the provinces really, and who's available, who's Irish qualified, who are the bolters, who's playing well at the moment. It's kind of difficult ones to, and some of it may be a little bit unfair because we haven't seen many games in the last few weeks, and I've always said the interpros are a great barometer for and a test for fellas who are trying to make that Irish squad. The number 6 that finished in played against the All Blacks, I suppose, and finished, played brilliantly in November, was Caelan Doris. He's probably the number one for me at 6. I think Peter O'Mahony's probably second. Then if Doris was injured or didn't play, or if something happened, Jack Conan, Doris would move to 8. And so a bit of shuffling around in my back rows. Peter O'Mahony is second. If Doris and O'Mahony weren't there, and there's a lot of ifs and buts in this, and if you were playing James Ryan and Ian Henderson in the second row, well, I'd be thinking then you have to get Tyg Byrne on the field and make sure he's on the field. He may well start and probably is the front runner to start in the second row. But I'd have him as the third on my list of number 6s. And then maybe Dan Levy, who hasn't played probably very, very little rugby in the last 2 years after that horrendous injury he had, and then had another setback when he came back. He's someone I'd love to see get back, and everyone I'd love to see to get back to get some sort of form. And if he was back playing well, you could easily play him at 7, 6 or 7. He's very physical and aggressive. So the 4 I have there are Caelan Doris, Peter O'Mahony, Tyg Byrne and Dan Levy. People will argue and say, well, there's the back row is very tricky, lads, because number 8s can play 6, 6s can play 7s. You can mix and match there very easily. But if everyone's fitting well, I'd go Caelan Doris, Peter O'Mahony, Tyg Byrne and Dan Levy.
Potentially, how good could Caelan Doris be in terms of the all-time great 6s?
Well, he's a full package, I think. He's so athletic. He's good line-out option. Great ball carrier. Good at the breakdown. Natural work rate. Exactly what you want in a number 6. Is he the kind of... Does he have that... Does he have any weakness? Well, it's hard to find any weakness in his game as a rugby player, but I just think... does he need to get a little bit more aggressive and more physical? Possibly. He's such a talented footballer, but I think I'd have no kind of fears about him going up against any brute or any, aggressive pack that he'd play against, because he's such a natural footballer. He's brilliant, but I can find very little weakness in his game. I think his overall performance, and he's always been touted to be this good, and we saw the best of him in November, and hopefully we'll see that on a regular basis going forward with Ireland, whether it's at number 8 or number 6.
Quinny, how pleasing is it to see Doris come back at such a good level, given that he had to take time out with the concussion? He missed such an important part of the season that may well have cost him a place in the Lions if he'd been fit to go last summer. But he's come back brilliantly in this autumn series.
Yeah, it is. It's great to see. The way the game has gone, Will, the more footballers and natural footballers you can have in your team, the better. Obviously, as you want your forwards to have a bit of a hard edge as well. You want them to be aggressive, and you want them to have a presence in the field. But I just think to have the ability of someone who runs onto the ball so well, accelerates so well onto the ball, and I often see him making carries, and he's reload, getting back off the ground, the work rate to get back into position again, and look for another carry is remarkable. He's very similar in his tackle count. He's just gets back up off the ground really, really quickly and wants more involvement. So it is great to see. He's a wonderful footballer and can offer so much in attack. And we've had questions about the Irish attack in the last couple of years. Well, maybe I'm biased as a former back row, but I just think if you can get your back row right and get them with big involvements in the game, they can win games for you. They can change the course of the games with their moments, their tackles, their turnovers, the way they can stop the opposition. And this guy he is the full package, really. I suppose he'll be, because of those performances in November, when you come up against a French pack and an English pack in the Six Nations, you'd be really hoping that that's the next step for him to really kind of show the world that this is what he can do on a consistent basis, and this is how good he is. So lot of pressure on him, but it's great to see him back and playing really well.
Number 7, how much does Peter O'Mahony have left at this stage?
A fair bit. I've been very impressed with his form this season. I think he started the season with Munster, and strange kind of setup for most teams had most of their internationals available, bar a couple of the Lions players. Munster didn't have that many. Peter O'Mahony wasn't on a Lions tour. I just think he's really important still, and I watched him closely in the first couple of games for Munster, and he played really well. I liked the way he was going about his business, the involvements he had in the game. Obviously, his biggest strength is that breakdown and line-out work. But I just think if you're picking a team and you have Peter O'Mahony at your disposal and you can get the best out of him, and he's fit and gone through a good period of obviously of conditioning, and he's ready for action, I think it's hard not to consider him. And I think Andy Farrell will always consider him going forward unless he has a really kind of dip in form. So look, I think he's a real option to move him, to play him as a 6 or a 7. Will he be frustrated and think, well, I'm more of a kind of a possibly a bench player now when the other 3 that played in November are playing well? Well, he won't be pleased with that, but I think his impact and the performance against Argentina was top notch in November. Just on the number 6, lads, you can have bolters there, and I kind of was thinking of who outside of that 4 could come in. Well, Nick Timoney's been playing so well with Ulster, continuously getting man of the matches. Paul Boyle is someone that I like. I think I like his edge. I like the way he's improved in the last couple of years. And then there's a young guy. The chances are that the first 4 that I mentioned are probably they're the options at 6 that Andy Farrell will look at. Like I say about Dan Levy, he needs to play more games and see him more consistently. But I'd love to see him getting back to somewhere near his best. But then if I was to pick 3 bolters, it'd be Nick Timoney, Paul Boyle, and I've been impressed with Cian Prendergast. He's one for the future.
Another man who played a bit of GAA in his day.
Yeah, it helps, I think, that hand-eye coordination. But he's someone I think has a lot of ability. He won't be involved in the Six Nations, but if he keeps progressing, so there's a lot of options there, and particularly right across the board in the back row.
I think you've given 7 names there at 6. What about 7? Josh van der Fleer is your number 1.
Yeah, well, the number 4, Johnny, the 4 I gave, and then I just thrown in a couple of bolters, guys who, they're probably an honourable mention. I don't want to insult them, but they're fellas that, if there was a number of injuries, that they would come into the mix, and I think they could do a job, particularly Timoney and Boyle. They've been in around the Irish squad for a bit now. Number 7, well, again, it's Josh van der Fleer, number 1. I have O'Mahony down as number 2, because I think that's what Andy Farrell will possibly look at. If something happened, Josh van der Fleer, well, it could be Caelan Doris and Peter O'Mahony on either side of the scrum very easily. Will Connor's number 3. Again, he's had a long-term injury. Someone who played in the Six Nations last year and was really impressive and had a great year with Leinster, but he's been out injured for a while. Very, very good player. And number 4 would be Conor Oliver. I think this guy deserves to start coming into the conversations now, because he's had a tough couple of years. Disappointment down in Munster, didn't get enough of opportunities for one reason or another, but he's a mainstay in that Connacht back row now, and I think his game has come on to another level. He's not the biggest guy in the world. He's definitely got stronger and more physical, but I think he's making a lot of carries. I think he made a lot of carries last week against Munster. He's very, very aggressive and has that little bit of a niggly edge that a good 7 would want, because I think he's probably used to getting the opposition maybe thinking that he is a little bit fragile, but he's not. He's as hard as nails, very good on the ball, and someone I think that deserves a mention. That if I saw Conor Oliver being picked for Ireland in the morning, I would be really optimistic that this guy can do a job here, that he can compete at this level. So he definitely deserves to start coming into the conversations because he's consistently doing it for Connacht.
Penny and Hodnett are a couple of your bolters.
Yeah, well, look, they're top quality. Hodnett has been out for so long for Munster, but you saw the performance when he came back and played against Wasps. He's still very young, a very, very good player. And again, he's got to start playing consistently now for Munster, and which I think he needs to. And given what we saw last weekend, I think John Hodnett needs to. I think he needs a run in the team where he can actually express himself, build his confidence. And of course, Scott Penny is a very good player as well with Leinster. We've seen glimpses of him, but that depth chart in Leinster makes it more difficult for someone like Scott Penny. But they're definitely bolters and guys who, as I said about the other bolters, probably won't come into the mix in the Six Nations, but deserve to be talked about as potentially playing for Ireland in the future.
Quinny, I never thought we'd get to a point where you'd be naming an all Leinster back row at the top of your depth chart, but given the way Jack Conan played in South Africa in the summer, I think it's understandable he'd be first choice at number 8.
Yeah, well, I won't make any just to avoid any sort of confusion. Well, I'd love to be picking an all Munster back row, but we'll stick with reality, and it doesn't really matter. And I've said this all along, of course we all have our bias towards our provincial teams, but you've got to be honest and direct and straight. They're the best back row at the moment. Jack Conan is someone who kind of shot onto the scene a number of years ago with Leinster, got into the setup with Ireland. I remember being in Australia in 2018 on that Irish tour, and Jack Conan being frustrated and disappointed that he didn't really look like someone who was a real viable option to start, and certainly had the talent to do that, but just the way he's kind of the last 12 months have gone for him have been unbelievable, and I'm pleased for him because I think that's his ability and that's where he's at, and that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the best of Jack Conan towards the end of the Six Nations last year, and that's not what I'm saying. There is Jack Conan hasn't played poorly. He's been very unlucky with some injuries. The opportunity in Leinster at times, with Max Teague and Caelan Doris and himself going for that number 8 jersey. I just think getting that opportunity last year at the end of the Six Nations and the performance against England, got him a spot on that plane to South Africa, and one of the best performances in a really dreadful line series. I think Jack Conan could come home from that tour with his head held high, and again his performance in November was top notch. So that All Blacks game, we kind of judge everything in that, but you're up near the top of the pile there when you're competing at that level, and I was just delighted that Conan came out and continued that form against the All Blacks, and that's my back row. The starting back row would be what finished against the All Blacks, so the team that played against the All Blacks, in Doris, Van der Fleer and Jack Conan, and they're the best players, and they're the people who have got the jersey at the moment. The danger sometimes when you have good performances previously, that you as a coach, Andy Farrell, will look back and say, well, because we haven't had a lot of rugby, I suppose, in the next week or two, unless some of these back rows do something remarkably bad or remarkably good, I think that's what the back row is going to be.
Yeah. And in terms of the conveyor belt coming through Coombs as well, Will, you want to give a mention to?
Yeah, I think Quinny Coombs has been one of the bright spots for Munster over the last couple of seasons. He's been a try-scoring machine right on the edge of this Ireland squad. And even though at number 8 it might be the 3 Leinster players, Conan, Doris, Egan, I know you've got them all in the top 4, but Coombs probably deserves a chance during this Six Nations, given how he's played at provincial level over the last 18 months particularly. Yeah,
definitely. I think the problem for Gavin Coombs at the moment is and it's just in the last couple of weeks, I think, is obviously the cast performance and the Connacht performance for Munster. And when you have that sort of negative kind of run and people questioning the way the team are playing and all that kind of stuff, which has been fairly evident all week, players get kind of bracketed into a bad performance. I look back at the game a couple of times last week, and Coombs carried the ball 14 times in the game. That's his big strength is his power and ability to make good carries for you. And obviously, as you said, score tries last season and the last couple of seasons. I think he had a great season last year with Munster and was so prominent, even in games that they struggled in. So he's got to find that little bit of spark again. He was in around the squad in November, and someone who, at this level, at the top level, I think he's made for it. He has that ability, and he's just struggling a little bit at the moment. So I think it's the learning curve for a lot of these younger players, and like Jack Conan, Coombs will have his moments, and Josh van der Fleer was in and out of the team a couple of times over the years. Things change very quickly, but Gavin Coombs has the ability to play at this level, and he's someone that I'm a big fan of. Max Egan played a couple of times, has been in the Irish squad as well, so he's very, very talented as well. But I think if I was going in an order, I'd be going Jack Conan at 8. If something happens, Jack Conan, I think the natural inclination will be to move Doris to 8. And or maybe Coombs will come straight into 8. I don't know, but I think Doris would move to 8, and then you'd be having a Peter O'Mahony or a Ty Byrne or somebody else going as a 6. But there's a lot of talent there. And again, the bolters, Paul Boyle, I mentioned him again because he can play 6, 7 or 8. Rhys Ruddock and Nick Timoney. Rhys Ruddock is someone who's been, never let the side down really. And he wouldn't be too impressed with me to mention him as a bolter for Six Nations. But I just think that there's so much depth there, and even in my time playing, I remember the Grand Slam in 2009, thinking I've no complaints there. I'm probably the 5th or 6th choice back row. When you have the likes of Leamy and Wallace and Heaslip, Ferris, it's hard to argue with that kind of quality. And I think Van der Fleer, Conan, and Doris, even though they're a little bit different, some of them, there'll never be another David Wallace, I think, as a 7, because he was just such a brilliant ball carrier and so quick and so powerful as well. But they all have different attributes and strengths there, and I think it's exciting that there's so much depth there, and there's a lot of good players, unfortunately, that may not get picked this Six Nations or even to the upcoming tour to New Zealand this summer.
Thanks a million for your time, Quinny.
Pleasure, lads.
Yeah, he mentioned there will never be another David Wallace. Paul Gillen on YouTube. Canning was a freak. Don't think we will see the likes coming through at that standard for a while. I do remember putting up a poll, Will, on Twitter. Who was better, Big Joe or King Henry? And it was very, very close. I do remember that.
Probably depends where you're from. But both are generational talents. Like Henry Shefflin, I think, has a serious shout to be remembered as the best hurler of all time, considering that he was the leader of probably one of the best sides ever with Brian Cody's Kilkenny team when they were at their pomp. Given that even in his advancing years, Henry Shefflin was able to give something special to that team and to be the leader that saw them come back even when Tipperary had taken their title away. Like a really, really special talent. Joe Canning, top scorer of all time, may well be reeled in because of the more fixtures that are available. If Seamus Callanan plays for a little bit longer, perhaps Patrick Horgan may well oversee that mark too. But he's still retired with that record intact. And as I mentioned at the start, Galway are probably going to have to replace Canning collectively. There's probably not going to be a player that will come through of the same absolute talent. But it's just remarkable. I remember I had the joy of covering Portumna quite a bit when Joe Canning was coming through as a talent in his teens. And to have seen him deliver on all of the promise that we saw on that young, lanky player who was coming through with his red helmet, to go through and be the talent that he was and to go on and be a hurler of the year is remarkable. Because there's so many times, Johnny, that you hear about a minor, and maybe David Clifford in football has done exactly what Canning has done, where he has gone from being a Roy of the Rovers at minor level to doing so at senior as well. So often it just doesn't happen that transition will actually take place.
It was one of the greatest sporting tragedies ever that his brother Ollie didn't win an All-Ireland with Galway. And imagine if Big Joe didn't win All-Ireland. And it was so close. We were only talking about one here. It could have been that Big Joe, like his brother Ollie, probably my favourite hurler of all time, didn't win All-Ireland. But thanks to Alan Quinlan for coming on there. Really building up, fascinating for the Six Nations. Hopefully there'll be crowds at Lansdowne Road. It really irks me that there is the potential that there may be stuff behind closed doors again. I think we should be moving on from this, but that's for another day. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors. JD, we got to have crowds at Six Nations.
Yeah, Johnny, good morning. Anna Will, good morning. And it's outdoors. Simple as that.
How can you tell double or triple vaccinated people who've done everything you've asked, who are 2 years into this, that they can't go to watch the rugby now? It just doesn't make sense to me.
Unless there's any kind of issue around staffing and close contacts, as you had at Leopardstown at Christmas, that would be the only reason. I don't think I don't know what the reason would be to have any restrictions around outdoor. What's the difference between now and last August, for example?
Exactly.
When we had 40,000 at All-Ireland final for Limerick and Cork, when Delta was the dominant variant, is now Omicron. We see the ICU numbers are stable. There's no new restrictions being imposed by NEFIT in terms of their advice to the government. So it's outdoors. Outdoors is the key, but a lot of the issues I think are around the close contact rules and staffing that.
And to be honest, Will, sometimes I think the sporting organisations, the sporting people are a little bit insipid on this, where they really need to let their voices heard. I know we're beholden to government for money that, as taxpayers...
Philip Brown did, though. Philip Brown did.
In fairness, I certainly find in football, Will, that there's a lot of just, we've gotten a load of money from the PUP here, just keep your mouth shut.
Yeah, and look, I think there probably will have to be a bit of a lobby from some of the sporting bodies in the coming weeks to get clarity before the end of January, because the thing that's really hanging over now is that the restrictions around crowds are in place in theory until the 31st of January. I know they're going to be reviewed before then, but I think some pressure will definitely be put on to take a look at them, because for the RFU particularly, where there's so much money riding on this in early February, and they've got 3 home games in the Six Nations this year, at a time when they've lost so much money over the last couple of years, they can't afford for restricted crowds or behind closed doors matches to happen. And like I see Rob Baxter from Exeter potentially giving the idea that if there are restrictions in the 5 nations that aren't England, why not play the entire Six Nations at Twickenham? That would be a disaster for the competing unions, given the amount of money that comes in from people coming through the turnstiles. And again, I think similarly, sometimes it can backfire on associations. We remember the GAA at one point where they wanted the assistant CMO to come in to explain restrictions last summer, and then there was an explosion of cases very soon afterwards, and they took flack for it. But I think it is up to the bodies themselves to make sure that there's clarity around this and that they can push to try and get people back into grounds, because there's a tremendous amount at stake here, quite aside from the fact that whether we can go through the gate to watch a game or not.
And the other thing, JD, people don't notice this. Dublin is a decimated city in many places. Like, businesses are really struggling, pubs are struggling, and I'm not trying to play the poor mouth here, but having people over to watch the Six Nations would actually revive the city at a time when a lot of people are really struggling.
Well, the All Blacks game was full, wasn't it? That was in November, and I don't really see the difference between then and now.
Well, we're more vaccinated. People have had boosters.
So to me, this is the government. The government needs to step up and I would say be sensible, obviously, but I don't really see the risk, the stark risk of having outdoor Lansdowne Road full, as you had in November for the New Zealand game.
Totally. Nobody's compelling you to go to the game. If you're afraid, you can stay at home. That is your choice. What have we got in the sports news?
Well, Novak Djokovic. Is an interesting tweet from Nick Kyrgios this morning. I don't know if you guys mentioned it or not yet already, but this is it. Look, I definitely believe in taking action. I got vaccinated because of others and for my mum's health, but how we're handling Novak's situation is bad, really bad. Look, these memes, headlines, this is one of our great champions, but at the end of the day, he's human. Do better. So his father said he's been crucified. He's at a hotel in Melbourne, a detention hotel where they house asylum seekers and refugees, talking about bugs in his room and that kind of thing, and he doesn't have his wallet and all that kind of stuff. Look, Novak Djokovic is rich. He knows the rules. It actually shone a light more for me about the treatment of asylum seekers and refugees.
Yeah, who nobody cares about. It's all about Djokovic.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Karen Andrews is the Home Affairs Minister in Australia, and she says he can leave at any time.
He is free to leave at any time that he chooses to do so, and Border Force will actually facilitate that. Yes, there was a visa issued. It is the second part of that process, which is the specific entry requirements to be able to cross Australia's border and to enter Australia lawfully.
So he's waiting until Monday to see if that legal challenge against his deportation will be upheld or whether he'll be allowed to play in the Australian Open. But I can't see in any way that he'll be allowed to stay in Australia, given Scott Morrison's put his neck in the line. There's an Australian election in May.
Which is entirely what much of this is about. Do you have any sympathy for somebody who says it is my right not to get vaccinated? You don't know exactly the consequences of putting this into my body. It is my right, and now you're treating me like a prisoner.
I don't have any sympathy for him because of the way he acted with that tournament in Serbia and Croatia when there was no vaccines in the world. And to me, that was a bit of irresponsible behaviour. So when I see that in his ledger, I don't have any sympathy for him.
I don't know if JD has gotten this on the news round because it's just coming in from
Trippier.
Fabrizio Romano is reporting that Philippe Coutinho is about to join Aston Villa from Barcelona today. What a story that would be.
Well, wait and see. Like, remember James Rodriguez going to Everton? How well did that work out? So Philippe Coutinho, wait and see.
Bit of a busted flush since his Liverpool
when he
days.
scores 20 goals and then we'll review it. Then we'll go, yeah, that was a great signing. Aston Villa are not short of money, though. Not short of money, and Stephen Gerrard's obviously got a bit of luster.
And Villa paying the salary will help Barca register Ferran Torres. That is a story.
What?
But Villa paying the salary will help Barcelona register Ferran Torres.
Oh, yeah, Ferran Torres. Yeah,
which is an interesting dynamic to it as well.
They even talked this morning about Haaland going to Barcelona. Where are the money's coming from?
Unbelievable.
Like, I haven't read the Simon Cooper book. It's still at home. It was one of those Christmas things I was meant to do and I didn't do. But
it's mainly coming from Goldman Sachs, lads, when it comes to Barcelona. Essentially what happened about a month ago was that Joan Laporta was able to restructure some of the loans that they previously had. So the hamstring for Barcelona has less been about getting capital to make signings like the €55 million for Ferran Torres. They could potentially pay the 75 million to get Haaland this summer. The issue that they've had are the financial fair play rules in Spain, which haven't allowed them to. They had to wait to register Dani Alves. They're waiting for, I think, Sergio Aguero's retirement to kick in to free up a bit of the salary cap as well. And they get a huge benefit from this Philippe Coutinho deal because usually it's a 1-in-4 ratio that you can reinvest back into your wage bill, but they're allowed 1-in-2 because of how high Philippe Coutinho's wages have been. So Ferran Torres can get registered and potentially they can finally get Gavi, Nico, some of their young B players registered to play with the first team now as well if Philippe Coutinho was to leave for 6 months to Aston Villa. So he gets to go back with Steven Gerrard, who we would have played alongside with at Liverpool. And Gerrard has been saying that, Coutinho is a magician and can still have a big impact when he comes into the Premier League. And you've got a Philippe Coutinho who is coming in motivated, lads, because he's been exiled from the Brazil squad because of his lack of playing time in La Liga. And if he has a good 6 month spell, he's got a chance of going to Qatar at the end of this year. So on the face of it, while it's going to be a very expensive transfer, loan with the wages that Aston Villa will pay, at least they're getting a Philippe Coutinho who has everything to play for.
What else we got?
Kieran Trippier going to Newcastle, the first signing of the Saudi regime. 2.5 year deal, undisclosed fee, 31 years of age. They're looking to stay up. They're 2 points from safety at the moment in the Premier League. Man City against Swindon tonight in the FA Cup third round, the tragic of the cup.
Tragic of the cup.
7 players from City have contracted COVID, are not available, and Pep Guardiola's not there as well. He's also isolating. Jake O'Brien could feature for Swindon. Seamus Power, great to see him playing in the Tournament of Champions in Hawaii. 2 under opening round, a big mixed bag is 71. At Kapalua, he has 6 shots off the lead. Cameron Smith of Australia leading on 8 under par. Armagh beating Cavan 112 to 11 points in the Dr. McKenna Cup last night. Ross McQuillan with a late goal for the Orchard County in Section 8 tonight. Donegal playing down in Ballybofey. In Section C, Derry versus Monaghan at Owen Begg. In the FBD League at the Airdome this evening, Mayo taking on Galway. Paul Mannion all across the back pages saying no to the Dubs this year.
Surprised you?
No, not surprised.
28 years of age.
It's hard to keep going the way those Dublin players went under Jim Gavin. It was a real
regimented.
Yeah, but it was a journey they were on, and once the journey is over, there's nothing to prove. And I think a lot of these players want to enjoy their football. And Desi can bring in new blood, and think it'll be a good test of what Desi's about this year with Jack McCaffrey and Stephen Cluxton not around as well. All Weather Dundalk hosting 3:45 today.
You just threw that in because I'm here.
No, I always mention the racing. Also tomorrow on Off the Ball Saturday, sporting predictions. We'll get yours, Johnny, on football. Damien Delaney's on the football chat. And we have Fiona Hayes and Gary Murphy giving their sporting predictions for 2022. Will, what was your best ever sporting prediction?
Oof. I've way more bad ones than good ones, JD.
Give us a good one. Offaly one of the years, or?
I don't know. I don't think as an Offaly fan you'd ever expect them to win something at the start of a year, even when Offaly were going well. We like to play things pessimistic going into it. I definitely didn't have like someone who may have claimed that they had Leicester a few years ago to win the Premier League or something.
Nobody had that.
You've entirely stumped me here when I'm thinking of a good prediction, because what I tend to do is I write them off very quickly after I've done so. And that's why I love when someone like Colin Buick pulls up OTBSports.com and goes, hey, look, you predicted that, Burnley were going to be relegated and that such and such would be the first manager gone, because 9 times out of 10 I'm wrong, but I just move on to the next hot take. Any
surprises in store, Will, this year? Anything under the radar? I think I've got this kind of strange thing that Monaghan might do well this year. They've got such a good backroom team now, whether they've got the talent or not, but they're only a point behind Tyrone last season. I think Gaelic football could throw up a couple of shocks this year.
Hopefully. I mean, I think we're looking at a championship which feels pretty wide open. And as you mentioned, Monaghan were very unlucky not to win that game at Croke Park in the Ulster final last year. And I wonder if that match hadn't been at Croker and maybe it was in Clonus, could they have overcome their neighbours and rivals in Tyrone and gone on to a run into the All-Ireland Championship? They always feel a little bit like the Nearly Men, but yeah, it's a crazy brain trust that they have now with Liam Sheedy added into that as well, and we'll see what he brings to the party for them. I think Kerry are very well stocked going into this year's championship. They'll be so disappointed with the way they played in the semi-final last year. Tyrone are back out to try and win the championship again, and for the first time in a while, because Dublin were so dominant, it's not just a case of feeling are Dublin on a procession to winning an All-Ireland. The Sam Maguire at least feels like there's 3 or 4 genuine contenders going into this year. So renewed excitement about Gaelic football for this season, John.
And the back of the Indo, my mate Davy Fitzgerald was at the game last night between Armagh and Cavan. It was a cold one, JD. It was a cold one. It was proper Arctic weather in the McKenna Cup. And I guess they were thinking of the hot days ahead.
Yeah, but they weren't up at 4 o'clock this morning like us, so... What was your best ever prediction, Johnny?
My best ever prediction. I do remember in that when Liverpool beat Man City in the second leg, when they were 3-0 up in the first leg, I backed them at 18-1 when they went 1-0 down.
Right.
On the proviso that if Liverpool scored, Man City's heads would completely drop, and it was an overreaction in terms of good predictions. I did predict Galway to win the Hurling that year, but I've had about 150 bad since. Let's go to the ads.
OTB AM on OTB Sports Radio, Ireland's first and only sports radio station.
He's a lion, he's a Grand Slam winner, he's Ireland's leading try scorer, and now you can hear him first, exclusively on the OTB Sports app.
One of my abiding memories is having my cut opened up again as I got hit by the trophy in Coppers on the dance floor.
Join Brian O'Driscoll for the best insight and analysis this rugby season.
We haven't had the usual kind of grenades from Gats, that's gone, so we're creating them ourselves.
Get the jump on everyone else. Download the OTB Sports app and turn on notifications now.
It's just as important as our physical health, if not more important. And when it comes to sport and performance, I think our mental preparation is more important. If you look at physically, a lot of athletes are in a very level par, especially in team sports, on a very similar level, and teams of a similar level. So it's what they do mentally to prepare, and you're constantly having a conversation with yourself on a pitch to sort of keep yourself going, and sometimes that's negative or positive self-talk, the sort of whispers in your ear or the voices in your head that you're getting. So sometimes in sport we're very hard on ourselves, and the public can be very hard on players as well. And I know within GAA it's an amateur sport, we still have to go back into our workplace, and you wouldn't get that in any other way of life where people can openly criticise you. It is challenging, and I suppose for me in the past I would have been one to put everything into sport and neglected other aspects of my life, and that was tough. In 2016 I'd reached out to the GPA, the Gaelic Players Association, because I was struggling a bit and I just didn't know what direction I was going, with a lot of injuries, and we were able to work with a performance coach to sort of try and put more time into my academics, my family, my friends, and Lena mentioned balance earlier, and I think that's the most important thing in sport.
With prices from only €289 for fully comprehensive car insurance, everyone's making the jump to getsetgo.ie. New business policies only. Prices subject to minimum premiums. T's and C's apply. MCL Insurance Services Limited Trading is getsetgo.ie is regulated by the Central Bank of Ireland.
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.
Chris Martin.
Oh, you're kidding me!
September.
Kyle Lafferty.
Are you joking me?
Is that right?
I know it's not right.
Anybody else?
Leash, was it?
Like, that is one of the most stupid questions.
Darius Vassell? Seriously, you all need to just stay quiet. This is getting really annoying doing this quiz.
What is going on here?
I'm looking forward to this, Owen.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I am as well. And thank you, Johnny. Thank you for holding down.
Sorry, let me just reiterate what I said there. I said I can't say I'm looking forward to this.
Oh, sorry. The line to Kerry put into my ears. I am looking forward to this.
Nathan looks like he's looking forward to it, though, to be fair.
Yeah, is Owen been held hostage or what's going on?
Yes.
Sort of looks like it.
Yeah, I am being held hostage.
Blink 3 times, Owen, if you want us to come rescue you. Has Peter Kane taken you captive?
Yeah, yes, for some strange reason. He's looking for a way back in. Yeah, I'm being held captive, and I will be let go today at some point, or tomorrow maybe, and potentially freedom will await. But that's the end. And if you see me under any distress, please come and rescue me. There's enough of you who know where I live at this point. But anyway, welcome. This is the shoutiest segment on Irish radio. It is a scintillating, it's a stupefying, it's the splendido crappy quiz. Every Friday we pit 3 team off the ball up against each other in our no-holds-barred quiz of sporting factoids at the end of the week. You've heard a couple of them already, but let me welcome today's contestants. Our first contestant today woke up on Christmas morning and wanted to go see swimming like everybody else on Instagram, but he couldn't because he lives in the Midlands. Give it up for Will Walk and Roll O'Callaghan.
I think you can go swimming in the Midlands, actually, but that's by the by.
They have
lakes.
A lake or a river. They are still possible, but yes.
You're welcome, Will. This is the first quiz of 2021. You finished, or 2022, I should say. You finished on a high last year, so good to have you back. Our next contestant today has this week been relegated to second place in the most important things to ever come out of Mayo, with the Connacht Superdome taking his place. Finally, at long last, Knock has its Sistine Chapel. Give it up for the Beast of Ballyhaunis, Nathan Nate Dog Murphy.
It's a fact. It's going to do wonders for the tourism around Ballyhaunis, far more than the statue of Nathan Murphy.
Is it, I could say, when I was down there for the All Ireland, it's between Ballyhaunis and Knock, right? Like, surely one of them is staking a claim.
It's in Bacon.
It already has its parish.
It already has. So yeah, Eastern Gaels will be the club you see there now that it's in, rather than Ballyhaunis. So yeah, it's just off the road between Ballyhaunis and Knock. So it's pretty much exactly halfway. But yes, Bacon is where it's officially located, and the people of Bacon would be getting very angry if they don't and aren't given their dues.
Fair enough. Our last contestant today has asked to never present to OTB AM again after this morning because he quite simply cannot handle the day drinking. Give it up for Johnny. It's his first time in the quiz, so we don't have a nickname award.
That's a lovely introduction, thanks. I'll have to take that one on.
Yeah, you're welcome. Great to have you making your crappy quiz bow. So you know the rules, as ever, is a classic crappy quiz with a series of questions on a range of themes. Then it's on to the slip and slide of trivia, which is the rapid fire round. For everyone at home, you can podcast the crappy quiz on OTBSports.com or on the OTB Sports app. If you're watching on YouTube, we would love a thumbs up. Please send any questions you have via postcard to Crappy Quiz Quizmaster, Off the Ball Towers, Marconi House, Diggs Lane, Dublin 2. Round 1.
I wouldn't have taken part if I knew Johnny was one of the contestants, because the tradition of the crappy quiz is that a debutante gets the easiest questions possible, because it'll be, Johnny, your special subject is horse racing. Name a jockey. Wow, Johnny, that's incredible. How did you know such things?
I'm appalling. Like, think Father Ted when he was asked the Pope's name. That's me at quizzes, to be fair. Like, not good.
Pass the parcel back on.
It is, and yes. Nathan may have touched on something there, so if anybody quickly wants to write around it, talk about horse racing, please send it on. Round 1 is the boring questions round, never multiple choice. Will, you're first up. who has won the RTE Sports Person of the Year award more than any other, picking up the award on 5 separate occasions?
This is going to be someone from a few years ago rather than someone right now. Sonia O'Sullivan?
Oh, correct.
Good answer.
Very good.
Yeah, she won a few.
I was going to say Big Jack.
No SOS needed for Will. like that one?
Else.
Sonia O'Sullivan. Okay.
Yeah, it took me a couple of seconds, but yeah, he had the SOS.
It just wasn't great.
Nathan, question one for you. The Pushkas Award has been awarded for a goal scored in the Premier League on 3 occasions. Mo Salah and Heung-min Son are 2 of the winners for their efforts against Everton and Burnley, respectively. But can you name the third?
See, the Puskas is a relatively new award, isn't it?
It is.
So it's not going to be like Beckham from the halfway line or Tony Yeboah or anything like that. I'm thinking of the last few years. There's my shortlist right now, Owen. My shortlist is Hashtim Kazami and maybe something like the Giroud or Mkhitaryan scorpion kick is the sort of thing that would end up in there. It's a bit of a ridiculous award. Like Heung-min Son's goal was nowhere near the best goals scored in world football last year.
This is a bit
It's
like
Burnley,
Who Wants to
for
Be
Christ's
Millionaire.
sake.
You're just waiting for one of us to cough when you keep reading out your options.
I'm not convinced, but I'm going to go with Hashtim Kazami.
It's not. It is Giroud. Olivier Giroud.
You're kidding me. I bloody commentated on that game and everything.
Does Salah win it for the goal against City, by the way, this year?
No, he's not nominated.
Not nominated. Oh.
Is he not Nathan? Oh, well, I'm just saying.
No, I didn't see him on the shortlist. Eric Lamella's Rabona.
Yeah.
But I don't know what the time limit is. So maybe it's per season rather than per calendar year. But I could be wrong. You see, they don't add context is everything for these goals. As you say, what made Salah's goal great was that it was against Manchester City in the game of that importance.
Exactly, because my brother is like, his goal against Watford was better, but like it wasn't. It was against Watford.
Lamella was this year, though, so I assume it's calendar year. Wasn't this season. He's in Seville now.
Unless it was like last season that they're...
Well, that's what I'm saying. It's at the end of the summer.
Was shit last season technically? I don't know. We'll find it out. We'll do a deep dive into Pushcast next week or something like that when we come back. Johnny, question one for you. Who was the most recent Republic of Ireland player to make their Premier League debut?
Good question.
That is a good question.
You can do a Nathan here and talk through what you're thinking.
I know it.
Any clues?
No.
Premier League debut.
Yeah. Who would the candidates be? But like I'm asking Johnny, just to fill a bit of air here, we can't hear what's going on inside your head.
I'm thinking Smallbone just comes into my head as one of the first. I'm just trying to think. Ida obviously has played. Evan Ferguson hasn't yet. I don't know.
Like, take a stab at it, Johnny. No, wow.
Not Kelleher. I don't know.
Okay, so you're gonna pass.
Pass.
Nathan, who is it?
Oma Bamidele?
It's not, but Oma Bamidele is second most recent. The most recent debutant is Nathan Collins.
Nathan Collins,
October 2nd. Yeah, just a few weeks after Oma Bamidele, actually. They're the only 2 debutants from the Republic of Ireland this season. Smallbone got a good few appearances 2 seasons ago.
Yeah.
He played last season as well. So the only person to score in round 1 is Will O'Callaghan. Round 2 is an equestrian of sport round to celebrate Johnny Ward's crappy quiz baptism this week. This round will be about his one true love, horses. I know, but you're People are here for, the comfort of predictability. Nobody wants twists and turns in the crappy quiz. Question 2 for you, Will. In what year was Shergar stolen?
Oh, come on. 1987?
No. 1983, Will. That's when Shergar was stolen. Nathan, question 2 for you. Who played the role of owner Charles S. Howard in the 2003 version of Seabiscuit?
Here.
Here isn't it's too easy, or here is too hard,
That's
Johnny?
a ridiculous question.
Or here is the actor's name.
Here.
I'm just trying to think as to anyone who was in that movie, and I can't think of anybody. George Clooney.
No, sorry. I thought that the jockey would have been too easy a question, which was Toby Maguire, but the answer to the owner was Jeff Bridges. I thought we'd all seen it. Apologies.
The dude.
I've seen it about 15 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, and it clearly didn't stick in the memory.
The Big Lebowski is possibly my favourite film, and I didn't even know that.
Well, there you go. Johnny, question 2 for you. The horse racing expert among us. One of the greatest performances by any horse ever, you'll undoubtedly agree, was the use of the Trojan horse by the Greeks in 1184 BC. Can you tell me in which modern day country is the city of Troy located?
Oh. Wow. I'm going to have a stab at Macedonia.
Oh, it's not Macedonia.
Turkey.
The answer is it's Turkey. Will O'Callaghan with the knowledge.
What's it called? It's actually called Troy, is it?
I don't.
It's only just runes now, Johnny.
Yeah, I think it's just runes. It's not actually.
You're missing the golden rule of the crappy quiz that when you try and question the quizmaster on anything, he won't have a clue. He's read that one line off Wikipedia and he has moved on with his life.
Talk to the audience.
It's very, very true. No context. You know the way Chris Tarrant often has a bit of context at the end of if you melt Who Wants to Be a Millionaire comparison, Johnny. I never have context. All I know is that
Chris Tarrant doesn't present Who Wants to Be a Millionaire anymore.
But he used to. When he used to do it, Nathan.
Okay.
I haven't seen the Jeremy Clarkson version. Round 3 is the Pass the Parcel of Doom round. Time for another edition of what was the hottest invention of 2021. I'll give you a category that involves a list of names, and all you got to do is give me a name that matches the list, and the Parcel of Doom passes on to the next contestant, who then also has to give me a name. We'll keep doing it until one of you give me an incorrect answer or can't give me an answer, at which point you will be eliminated, and the last contestant standing gains a point. So Will, we'll start with you on the first of 3 lists. Can you name any goalkeeper that has played for the Republic of Ireland men's team since Paddy Bonner's last game?
All right. Since his last game. Gavin Bazunu.
Correct. That's 1. It goes to Nathan next.
Shay Given.
Shay Given is correct. Johnny.
Mark Travers.
Mark Travers is on the list for sure. Will.
Dean Kiley.
Dean Kiley.
Guest of the show yesterday.
Guest of the show yesterday. There you go. May or may not have inspired this. Nathan.
Caoimhín Kelleher.
Caoimhín Kelleher, yeah. Johnny.
Since Paddy Bonner.
Yeah.
Right, there have been plenty.
Yes.
Jesus, where am I going here? This is the gym moment from Father Ted, isn't it? Here. God.
Johnny, we're going to have to put a countdown on this. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Johnny's out.
I'm too slow this morning, and there are probably about 5 there that I could have named.
Nathan. Oh, sorry, Will, sorry.
Paddy Kenny.
Paddy Kenny.
Yeah.
Nathan.
David Ford.
David Ford. Your own county man.
It goes back to me here, does it?
No, you're out.
You're gone.
Oh, good. That's good.
Will.
Kieran Westwood.
Yes.
Yeah, Kieran Westwood.
Darren Randolph.
Darren Randolph has been said, yes.
Oh, there's not too many left now at this stage. Alan Kelly surely played a game after Paddy.
Yeah, Alan Kelly.
Oh, you've killed me now.
We are into the weeds of this one. If you manage to get one correct here, I suspect your opponent won't be able to. So, Nathan, what do you got?
Who are we looking at for Ireland? Go Nicky Colgan.
Nice.
Good answer. Good answer. Well,
I'm wondering if he played a game. Did Kieran O'Hara play one?
Kieran O'Hara, you're out. Unfortunately, Will, he did not.
Joe Murphy?
Joe Murphy, yes, is another one. You forgot Rob Elliott, lads.
Oh, yeah.
And also Keith Brannigan, who played once in 1997, Colin Doyle, and Wayne Henderson.
Wow.
Were the other ones. So Nathan gets 1 point here. We'll move on. And Nathan, you're going to kick us off on this one. Can you name any club that has won the All-Ireland Senior Club Football Championship in Gaelic games since the competition began in 1970?
Crossmaglen.
Crossmaglen. Up and running. We are on to Johnny next.
Currafin.
Currafin is correct. Will O'Callaghan.
Portlaoise.
Portlaoise. Back to Nathan.
Crossmalina.
Crossmalina is bang on.
Caltra.
John. Caltra, yeah.
St. Vincent's.
St. Vincent's is correct.
Ballina.
Ballina is correct as well.
Crokes.
Yeah. Wait, which Crokes?
Kilmacud Crokes. Sorry. Sorry. Kerry Crokes.
Kerry Crokes is correct. Yeah.
Kerry Crokes. Kerry Crokes.
Dr. Crokes.
Dr. Crokes is correct. Yeah.
We'll leave the other one for Johnny on the sweet background. Nemo Rangers then.
Nemo Rangers is correct. Yeah. Nathan.
Ballyboden.
Ballyboden is correct. Johnny.
Nafina.
Nafina never won the All-Irelands.
Oh?
No, they didn't. So you're out.
Can I use his Kilmacud Crokes then?
You can use his Kilmacud Crokes. That's correct.
Why did you even say that to me? I mean, there was no need to say that. The answer was correct. You could have said, yes, and then I could have... Anyway.
Nathan?
Salthill Knocknacarra.
Salthill Knocknacarra is correct.
I'm trying to remember the ones that haven't been said now at this stage. Think for a second. Stockmeal didn't win one.
Nafina runners up in 2000. I'm a little bit paranoid about that for a second.
Finbars.
Finbars is correct. Nathan.
Ooh. Let me think.
Gonna need to get a quick enough answer here.
Are you though? Are you? UCD?
UCD is a good answer.
That's a good shout.
Still alive. Will.
Try the other college. Have UCC won the All-Ireland?
They have not. Nathan gets the second point in this round. The remaining clubs that haven't been said in alphabetical order are Austin Stacks, Ballinderry Shamrocks, Baltinglass, Balahi, Castle Island Desmonds, East Kerry were the first winners of the competition before they were not allowed.
Castle Island won the championship.
They did.
There you go.
Lavey, O'Donovan Rossa, St. Gall's, St. Bridget's, St. Mary's Bullen, Burren and Thomond College were the remaining clubs.
Wow.
Johnny, you can kick us off on this one. Can you name anyone who has finished the season of the League of Ireland Premier Division in the 21st century as top scorer?
In the 21st century?
Yeah.
John Caulfield.
John Caulfield is not correct.
So, was he the... Wow. There we go.
We go to Will.
Patrick Hooban.
Patrick Hooban is correct. Yeah. Won it on 3 occasions, 14, 18 and 20. Nathan.
Sorry, I missed him there. Go on.
You missed the question?
Yes.
Sorry, the question is League of Ireland Premier Division top scorers in any season in the 21st century.
Who did Johnny say?
Johnny's out. He said John Caulfield. Will O'Callaghan said Patrick Hooban. I don't know why I give you their first full names.
Gary Twigg.
Gary Twigg is correct, yeah. 09, 10 and 12. Will.
Glenn Crowe.
Glenn Crowe is correct 3 times as well. Nathan.
Great shout.
Last season, Nathan.
I'm trying to think who was top scorer last season.
Going to move away this year.
Hey.
Helping the guy who's already got 2 points. I like it, Johnny.
I'm just trying to retrieve myself here because I've been so appallingly bad. I'm trying to imply that I know something about anything.
The one I was going to go for is going completely out of my head now. Okay, Johnny.
Top scorer last season.
Sorry, I'm trying to think who was top scorer last season. If it was that obvious, why did you say it? Not last season, but I'm going to go for David McMillan.
David McMillan is not correct. Has never finished the season as top scorer. So, Will, you get the points. Who were you thinking of, Johnny?
Georgie Kelly. I think.
Yeah, I was going to say Georgie Kelly.
Patrick Hoban massively enjoyed that quiz because I got the question wrong straight away. Hoban was then mentioned, and of course, Hoban would have denied David McMillan various awards by scoring more goals than him.
It's a good point. Just to go through some of the other possible answers there. Jason Byrne won it on 4 occasions. Christy Fagan won it in 2014. Mark Farron in 2008. George Kelly, as you mentioned. You forgot Shawnee Maguire, lads. 16 and 17. David Mooney, Pat Morley, Junior Ogedi Uzogwe in 2019. Rory Patterson, Mark Quigley, Richie Towell, and Eamon Zayed in 2011 was top scorer in the League of Ireland Premier Division. So the scorers after round 3 are Will on 2 points, Nathan on 2 points, Johnny on nothing, but there is plenty of time yet. Round 4 is the Fun Free Magic number round. Contestants get 3 points for getting the number exactly right.
Whoa. Go back to how does the scoring work for that last round?
There's no deducted points anymore.
There's no deducted points. Okay.
No, it's just whoever is the last man standing gets points, because there's complaints about people not being able to comprehend the idea of negative scoring.
Sorry, I'm gradually losing the will to live here. Can we just get this over with?
Contestants get 3 points for getting the number exactly right. If no one manages that, the nearest contestant who doesn't go bust gets 2 points. Do you have a pen and paper, Johnny? The second closest gets 1 point. Again, I'm going to say that we can only accept the answer that's written on your paper. I'm also going to ask for your pens once the music ends. So if you don't mind,
have a pen here.
give us the following number.
I can write it on my phone.
You can write it down on your phone. Go for it. So, what I need is the number of Australian Open titles won by Novak Djokovic in his career to date, plus the number of major trophies Phil Jones has won at Manchester United, plus the number of teams that take part in the 3rd round of the FA Cup, plus the number of times Peter Wright has now won the PDC World Darts Championship. Your 30 seconds expire when Sinatra sings Bright Shiny Beats.
Who's that question for?
For all of you.
All right.
So
sorry, in terms of Phil Jones, you mean like he has the medal, he was on the bench, he was a part of the squad, or major trophy?
As ever, all numbers are plucked from Wikipedia. So whatever you think Wikipedia has, I think he was part of all of these squads. All of these squads.
What was the question again?
How many major trophies does Phil Jones have? How many Australian Open titles does Djokovic have? The number of teams in the 3rd round of the FA Cup, and the number of World Darts Championships Peter Wright has. Will, what have you got?
I've gone with 79.
79. Nathan?
I've gone with 78.
78. Johnny?
73.
73. I can tell you that Nathan Murphy is bang on the money with 78. Oh! He moves himself to 5 points.
Possibly the year you were born, Nathan, was it?
Sorry, what?
Possibly the year you were born, was it?
What was the year I was born?
79?
78.
No, 81.
So, Nathan, take us through this then. The number of Australian Open titles won by Djokovic?
8.
9. Phil Jones has 3 major trophies.
Yeah.
Premier League 13, FA Cup 16, Europa League 17.
Oh, Peter Wright has 2. He played in 3.
Peter Wright
was, I got lucky there.
And then there are 64 teams in the 3rd round of the FA Cup, which adds up to 78. Doesn't matter. Nathan, you're on 5. Will, you're on 2. Johnny, you're on nothing. Our winner tonight will be decided in the round that separates the men from the boys, the Peter Wrights from the Peter Wrongs. It's no team in particular, ridiculously easy rapid fire round. The score you get in this round will be added to your score in the previous round. There'll be 40 seconds for everyone to answer for the same set of questions. So we start with Nathan, then on to Will, and then on to Johnny. If you get one wrong, we deduct you a point and move on to the next person. And I'll keep asking you questions until you get one wrong. So, Nathan, are you ready?
Yes.
Your 40 seconds starts now. Who's top of the championship?
Sheffield United.
Bournemouth. Which NFL team did Antonio Brown play for between 2010 and 2018, Will?
Oh, Pittsburgh.
Correct. Who are the reigning champions of the African Cup of Nations, Egypt or Algeria?
Egypt.
No, Algeria. Who did Chelsea first sign Romelu Lukaku from in 2011, Johnny?
Oh.
Too long. Anderlecht. Who was the Sligo football manager, Nathan?
Tony McEntee.
Correct. Who was the Tyrone captain that lifted Sam Maguire last year?
Oh,
Too long. Roger Campsey. Name the former referee who was the current technical director of IFAB, Will.
We're out of time anyway. It's Kalina, surely.
No, it's David Ellery. It's not. It's not gonna count. So it doesn't matter anyway. Nathan, you win on 4 points. Will, you finish on 1 point. Johnny, you finish on -1. Nathan Murphy, congratulations.
Johnny, you can come back anytime.
Thanks for taking part, Johnny.
Well, I was the champ at the end of last year. I was the champion at the end of last year and the champion at the start of this year. There was that Christmas special that doesn't really count towards the overall. You know, it's just a bit of fun.
I think it counts far more than anything else.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't, because it's not an individual thing.
Your Shamrock Rovers
I was brought down by Shane Hannon.
Is bad. Now, when you didn't know Georgie Kelly, your Shamrock, like you're.
I was going to say Danny Mandreu.
He didn't even make the team of the year.
I'm still upset, Johnny, about the year before where you had that great tip to back Graham Burke, and first day of the season he scores 5 goals, and I was like, this is the greatest day of all time, and then they cancelled the bloody season.
Yeah, that was a bit of a shame. League of Ireland podcast coming soon, I'm sure, to
apologies.
all your ears. Thanks a million for being with us. That has been this week's Crappy Quiz. Back with you next Friday morning.
September.
Kyle Lafferty.
Are you joking me?
Is that right?
I know it's not right.
Anybody else?
Leash, was it?
Like, that is one of the most stupid questions.
Darius Vassell? Seriously, you all need to just stay quiet. This is getting really annoying doing this quiz.
What is going on here?
Yeah, my live notes includes the questions just didn't suit you today, as a great DJ once said. The questions actually weren't that bad. I'd like to apologise to my parents, their parents, and anyone who had anything to do with me for my performance there. OTB AM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning. Start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved racers. OTB Sports Radio coming up today. OTB Gold with Catherine Switzer at 1 p.m. 3 p.m. I'll be back. I might just go for a sleep in the corner here, like in the old days in Setanta, when if you're on a late night and you're up for the 7 o'clock shift, you'll be like, what's the point going home? I'll just find a floor and sleep there, or maybe I'll just go home. Anyway, I'll be back for 3 o'clock Friday night race, and we've only Charlie Carter on. Charlie, the big winner at Leopardstown, one of the days in the maiden hurdle. Horse is worth a few quid now, so I'd say Charlie will be in a bullion form. Team 33 LOI legend, fellow county man Alan Keane, that's at 4 p.m. 6 p.m. OTB Gold with Ronnie Delaney, and we're live at 7 p.m. tonight. As I mentioned, OTBAM is brought to you by Gillette. Good morning, start with Gillette. Put your best face forward with their new and improved razors, or otherwise you could just be Nathan Murphy with his beard winning the crappy quiz in a hack canter. Thanks very much for joining us all week on OTBAM. If you've missed anything at all, you get us on the OTB Podcast Network or on Off the Ball's YouTube channel. OTB is live tonight from 7 p.m. Saturday from 1 p.m. I'll be here tomorrow with Dan, JD and Damien Delaney to talk football, the FAI Cup, so on and so forth. We're back as well for Sunday from 1 p.m. and OTB AM returns Monday morning from 7:30 a.m. with Ger and Owen. Stay tuned to OTB Sports Radio throughout the day on your OTB Sports app. Right now we're leaving you with Sligo Rovers and Cameroon legend, and what a legend he is, Joseph Ndo, talking about the African Cup of Nations, which begins in the next couple of days with Nathan.
Welcome along to the Football Show. Nathan with you for the next hour. So the African Cup of Nations gets underway on Sunday. This year's tournament takes place in Cameroon with the opening game between the hosts and Burkina Faso. Senegal are the favourites. They have the likes of Sadio Mane, Edouard Mendy, Kalidou Koulibaly, Idrissa Gueye in their squad. The other contenders include the defending champions Algeria, who will feature Riyad Mahrez, and Egypt, who will obviously be looking for Mo Salah to replicate his sensational club form on the biggest stage in African football. To look ahead to the tournament, I am joined by a League of Ireland legend, a league winner with Shells, Bows and Sligo, but more importantly for this chat, a 2-time African Cup of Nations winner with his native Cameroon. The great Joey Ndo is with us. Good to talk to you, Joey.
Hi.
How are you keeping?
Yeah, good, thank you. And you?
I'm very well. So we're just a couple of days away now from the start of the African Cup of Nations. And again, it always feels like the build-up to the tournament in this part of the world, because of its place in the calendar, has been less about the tournament itself and ends up being completely dominated around players being taken away from Premier League clubs and being taken away from the biggest leagues in Europe at a crucial part in the season. As someone who's played in the African Cup of Nations, who knows how important it is to the people of Africa, do you find it frustrating that so much of the talk from football fans is around about the players who are leaving their clubs and how it feels like a bit of a nuisance for those football supporters?
Not at all. Because I feel that everyone has to defend his interest. And by the way, as a player, I think that it would be strange for my manager to say, "Oh, I'm so happy. I'm so happy for him. He can stay as long as he wants," isn't it?
Yeah.
So I felt that. Listen, that's a subject who always been there for years, and the only way to solve it is for the Confederation African Board to find a solution, and the only solution is to make the tournament during the league off season. So if it's not the case, and if the tournament has to be every January the way it is now, so we shouldn't complain about the clubs felt that it's against their best interest. Because, by the way, if Hero was during the season, do you think that the club will be happy?
No, clearly not. And
so that's what I'm saying. The main thing is for the African country to have their players. I think it shouldn't be too much noise. They shouldn't even complain about what the club are saying, because I think what the club are saying is fair. They have to look after their own interests. Now, African nation, they have to also look after their own interests. The main thing for you is to have your player. It doesn't matter if it came one day before the tournament start or 2 days before tournament start, because the hardest thing also is that all the best players are not playing in Africa. I think that's also something they have to look at, because if you don't want people to complain, then we have to find a solution. And the first thing is, unfortunately, all the best players are not playing in Africa. And we have to understand that those clubs are paying those players. So we need a solution, because for years it was the same issue, for years.
Attempts have been made as well. The last African Cup of Nations did take place during the summer at the end of the European club season, and there were obviously no issues then, and various different reasons, COVID included, meant that this tournament had to take place at this time of the year. In terms of what it means to Cameroon to host the tournament at the moment, it was meant to host it 2 years ago, ended up being moved to Egypt. There's a civil war taking place in Cameroon for the last 4 years. There have been question marks around security. There's obviously huge COVID issues everywhere in the world right now. I don't know if you've been talking to people from home and got a sense of what's expected of this African Cup of Nations, and whether it's a welcome tournament in Cameroon at the moment.
It's always a welcome, because I think even the COVID situation in Europe is completely different than the COVID situation in Cameroon. In Cameroon, it's less. That's the first thing. Secondly, there is a civil war based on, I think, what happened in terms of politics. But football is not about politics. And that's the beautiful things about football in Cameroon, is that football always brings people together. And if there is one thing I think Cameroonian people need now, is football, because I don't see anything who can bring armies together, at least to have a pause, is when Cameroon play. And I think that tournament is not just something great for Africa. I think it was something needed for Cameroon.
When I think about Cameroon, and I think when most people of my generation think about Cameroon, the first thing that comes to mind is Roger Milla celebrating by the corner flag and dancing at Italia 90. you're around, 13, 14 when Cameroon have that incredible success at Italia 90. What was that like to live through?
Listen, I was a huge fan. Everything was, I would say, paused during the game. Even not during the game, but I would say maybe 4 or 5 hours before the game. You couldn't get anything signed in any office because there were no one there anyway. So everyone was preparing, family was there. It was a little bit, I would say, the one thing I can compare of is Christmas. It was a little bit like Christmas. And listen, the way the team plays, the enthusiasm, it's more about the enthusiasm because we knew that with the player we had, we can do something special. But when it comes to that event, it's always how much are you enthusiastic, how much it does not affect you, because that's the hardest thing when it comes to higher competition. And I think they handle it so well, so well. And the result was amazing because, by the way, Mr. Roger Miller, he wasn't even meant to be in that World Cup. That's the crazy thing. He wasn't meant to be in that World Cup, and he ended up being in that World Cup. But for years, he was the best striker in Cameroon. So when I was younger, they used to tell me story about him, like they're telling story about Santa. So he just to tell you, and what you saw there is nothing compared to what he used to do in Cameroon.
Right.
Nothing. He just. That's why you remember Eto'o always said he is what he is because of Roger Miller.
So did Italia 90 for the people of Cameroon just confirm what you already knew about Roger Miller, that he had that talent? It was just a matter of time at a very late age, because he was 37, 38 when he went to Italia 90.
No, but that's what the everyone else saw it, but we were seeing that for years in Cameroon, and he was playing in France. But I would say the tournament, the world started to be, I would say, a little bit more open. And that's why you have that such an impact, but in terms of talent, we knew where Roger Miller is. Listen, it's not just him. It's not just about playing football. I think for him, he was a master of football.
Italia 90, as I'm sure you're well aware from all the years you've been living in Ireland, had a pretty seismic impact on this country from what the Republic of Ireland did. When you think back to that first match against Argentina and beating Argentina, when you talk about the walls opening, like the sense of national pride that came with beating that brilliant Argentina side, and that must have been immense.
Not really, because in Argentina we knew that you have led Diego Armando Maradona, and by the way, as much as we were supporting Cameroon, each one was supporting also Maradona. That's the reality. We want Maradona to be on the ball, to do his tricks, but we knew that we have to stop him. And the one thing about Cameroonian players that they love that kind of challenge, especially when no one expects them to do something. And I think the point on that, Matt, is that we have to stop Maradona playing. That was the key. We nothing else will be important, and we knew that. In some point, we're going to score, but if you allow Maradona to dictate the game, it's over. So that's why it wasn't too much a surprise that we won. But I think it was more surprise the way we played.
Right. The tournament as a whole, and geez, we're going back a very long time now. We're going back over 30 years at this stage. Like, Cameroon are 7 minutes away from getting to a World Cup semi-final, from beating England in that quarter-final. When the team came back home, did they return home like the Irish team that got to the quarter-finals as absolute heroes?
Exactly, that's the word. Heroes. Like, some sponsor, I think some sponsor give them houses, other gives bonuses. They got a reception into the presidential palace. Listen, they were the kings. They were the kings. And I think it changed a lot of things, not just in Cameroon, but also in Africa. Because before that, football were not, I would say, welcomed in African family. It was seen like a job that only loser can do it. So it changed completely the dynamic of football, how they perceive footballers, because we start to understand that the one thing where we're going to always agree, the one thing we always going to cheer up, the one thing we always is going to be in peace with is football, because politics is not possible. So even music sometimes is not possible because we have all those tests about music. But football is everyone. It doesn't matter how much we hate each other, but when those guys are on the pitch, it's only one song we can sing.
You're at a very formative age around then in terms of your footballing career. You're 14 and you already clearly have the talent. Are you thinking, does it change your thinking, that World Cup, as to what's possible as a footballer in Cameroon? And as you went through and played with the Cameroon national side and players of a similar age, did you get a sense that actually there was a lasting legacy from that team in terms of what you thought you should be able to achieve as players?
Yeah, of course. But also the one thing I would say that, my prayer to God always been to play football. To be fair, I never really, I would say, dream of playing in the national team or playing the World Cup and the African Cup. For me, was to play football. And I think it's in 1994 that I felt that, you know what, I think I'm going to play the next World Cup.
Right.
Because I can feel how much I become stronger, how much I understood football. And I just felt, if there is, I would say, some type of manager who understands my game, I will have a big chance to play in the World Cup. And my motivation always been just to play football. Because, listen, before I play my first game in the national team, I've been called up for training camp, I don't know, maybe 20, 25 times. I never played even a friendly game.
Right.
So it's only when the new manager came that I was able to play. So that's what I'm saying. If I was just dreaming about football, about the national team, I think I would be discouraged, because when I would say, is not the best player in the Cameroonian league, but I couldn't have a game in the national team. So in some point you start to ask the question, why? But for me, I never asked why, because I was enjoying my football with my club, and that's the only thing I wanted to do. So the national team for me was just to say, okay, listen, now I have opportunity, because the next manager, he loves the way I play. And I take advantage of it. I took advantage of it.
That was Claude Leroy, was it, who was in charge at the 98 World Cup?
Yeah.
That was a pretty exciting time for Cameroon football when you look at the young players who were emerging. I think you were only 22 at the time, and Rigobert Song is 21. Pierre Wome is there, who's a young player as well, I think only 19. Joseph Desire Job is 20. And Samuel Eto'o is emerging at just 17. Was Eto'o one of those players who you knew straight away, this guy is going to be one of the greats?
Of course, because listen, it's not just him. I think in the team, I will say maybe 3 or 4 who were as good as Eto'o. And the thing also about Claude Leroy that that wasn't the first time he has to manage Cameroon. I remember the first time he came, I was very young, and he changed the team. He brought so many young players. So when I heard his name, that he's going to be the next manager for the World Cup, I told my dad that I'm gone. I was so sure because I know the way he plays, I know the kind of player he likes, and I say, if he saw me play, it's good for me. So, and you can see how much young player he brought into the team. How much young player he brought in the team, because I think it's so much for the Cameroonian national team to renew the team when he is needed. I think that was one of his strengths, is that he knew when the time is needed to renew a team. And that period, 98, listen, we have a fantastic team, fantastic. And for Eto'o, I think people talk about Eto'o from Barcelona. Only few watch Eto'o play for Mallorca. It was, I would say, 20 times better than the one in Barcelona.
In what way?
Because in Barcelona, I think it was a little bit too easy for him. He has Ronaldinho, he has Iniesta, he has Xavi, you know. So he didn't do much. I would say he done it, but he didn't do much to score.
He scored 36 goals in a season.
No, but in Mallorca, he didn't have all those people. Do you think that Barcelona are going to go in a team like Mallorca to get their striker? That they have enough money to get any striker. But if you saw them go to Mallorca to sign Eto'o, you know that guy, he was something else. Like, he has to do everything by himself. And that's the difference. Because you have to understand, when you play with talented player or the player as good as you, it's a little bit more easier for you. You like, the things you have to do when they are not there is different than the thing you have to do when they are there. And I always say Eto'o in Mallorca, it was a different level. But then now when he went to Barcelona, now his only job there will be to score. He doesn't have...
OTB AM.
With Gillette, put your best face forward with our new and improved razors.